Taoist Hu Yan swept a sleeve through the air, and a burst of red light flashed over the table, upon which an orange wine jar appeared. The jar was around a foot in height, and judging from the antiquated patterns engraved onto its surface, it was clearly a very old jar of wine. Even before the jar was opened, it was already releasing a mesmerizing aroma throughout the surrounding area. Having discussed wine on so many past occasions with Taoist Hu Yan, Han Li had accumulated a great deal of knowledge on the subject, and he immediately exclaimed, "This is exceptional wine. Judging from its fragrance, this must be seasonal dream, right?" Precisely. This jar of seasonal dream was brewed using cloud-born fruits as the main ingredient, and I had to spend countless years brewing it, Taoist Hu Yan said as he removed the stopper from the jar, then conjured up 3 pristine white cups, all of which he filled with wine. The wine was as clear and pure as a mirror, and it had a light red hue that was further accentuated by the white cup that it had been poured into. Han Li took a sip, and his eyes instantly lit up as he praised, "This is indeed exceptional wine." As soon as the wine flowed into his mouth, it immediately transformed into a burst of heat that was as mellow as a cloud, filling his entire body with a sense of warm comfort. On top of that, the wine also contained immense immortal spiritual power, instantly replenishing the immortal spiritual power that he had expended during his battle against the 2 palace masters. Of course, my cultivation aptitude can only be described as decent at best, but when it comes to brewing wine, just this jar of seasonal dream alone is sufficient testament to prove that I'm unmatched in the entire northern glacial immortal region, Taoist Hu Yan replied in a proud manner. As soon as you have a bit to drink, you immediately start bragging like a fool. Yun Nai scolded with a displeased expression, but she also took a small sip of wine from her cup. The 3 of them exchanged some small talk, then began to talk about what had happened after they had parted ways in the immortal manner. As it turned out, following Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai's departure, they immediately hid somewhere secluded, but not long thereafter, they were teleported out of the infernal frost immortal manor and ended up in the Black Wind Sea. After some discussion, the 2 of them decided not to brave the soul-stirring winds again. Instead, they had the same idea of leaving the Black Wind Sea through the teleportation formation. However, they encountered the vast Flow Palace's cultivators there, so they disguised themselves before entering the teleportation pagoda. I knew it. Prior to stepping into the formation, I detected 2 familiar auras nearby. That was you too, right? Han Li chuckled. Indeed. I didn't think you would have the courage to blatantly steal a teleportation spot right under the noses of the vast Flow Palace cultivators. I have to say, I was really impressed at the time, Taoist Hu Yan also chuckled in response. By the time I got to Black Wind City, it was already right on the cusp of the scheduled teleportation, so I didn't have much of a choice, Han Li explained with a smile. How did you fare against Gong Shujiu after we left, fellow Taoist Li? Yun Nai suddenly asked, and a serious look appeared on Taoist Hu Yan's face upon hearing this. Gong Shujiu is already dead, Han Li replied in an indifferent voice as he took another sip of wine. Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai had already guessed that this would be the outcome, considering Han Li was alive and well, but they were still very much taken aback by this answer. Your powers are truly unfathomable, fellow Taoist Li. To think that even a high zenith cultivator is no longer a match for you. Your cultivation aptitude is truly unmatched, Yun Nai said as she raised her cup with a hint of admiration in her eyes. Even back in the Blaze Dragon Dao, I knew that there was something special about you, but never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that you would come so far in just a few centuries. Taoist Hu Yan chuckled as he also raised his cup. You're far too kind, fellow Taoists. Gong Shujiu died by the hand of multiple people, and I only made a very minor contribution, Hanli said in a modest manner. Then what about that gray immortal? Taoist Huyen asked. The gray immortal immediately left following Gong Shujiu's demise, and he didn't target me. After that, I left the High Zenith Palace, but I was also suddenly teleported out of the Immortal Manor shortly thereafter. There was still supposed to be some time left until the closing of the Immortal Manor, so I presume someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, Han Li replied, refraining from telling the two about Mo Yu and Lu Yuking. Indeed, there's a very good chance that the Gray Immortal was controlling everything from the very beginning. I've heard that he has some ties with the Infernal Frost Immortal Lord, and he was also clearly very familiar with all of the restrictions in the High Zenith Palace. It's a good thing that he's not a bloodthirsty individual. Otherwise, even if we managed to kill Gong Shuhang, there's no way we would have been able to escape from him, Taoist Huyen mused. We were indeed very fortunate. While it's true that he's a gray immortal, his personality seems to be different from what gray immortals are said to be like, Han Li remarked. The death of an immortal envoy is a very important matter, and I'm almost certain that there will be a new immortal envoy sent to the northern glacial immortal region soon to investigate this matter. All of those immortal envoys are skilled in secret techniques that allow them to identify members of the Reincarnation Palace, so do be careful, Taoist Huyen cautioned with a serious expression. Thank you for the warning, fellow Taoist Huyen. I'll be sure to keep myself well concealed from here onward, Han Li replied. With your powers, as long as you remain on your guard, you should be fine. If you can't stay in the northern glacial immortal region, then just leave, Taoist Huyen advised. Do you know of a way to leave the northern glacial immortal region? Han Li asked with an intrigued expression. I heard from Tao Lord Bailey that there exists an interregion gate in the northern glacial immortal palace that leads to other immortal regions. However, apparently, each teleportation expends an enormous amount of resources, so even the palace master may not be able to use it whenever he pleases. Hence, that's most likely out of the question. Even if we manage to force our way to the interregion gate, we'll most likely be confronted by immortal envoys sent by the heavenly court before we manage to figure out how to activate the gate, Taoist Huyen replied. I've also heard about this. If this is an unfeasible route to take, then are there any alternatives? Han Li asked. The alternative option would be to cross the primordial land between immortal regions. However, I've heard that such a journey is no less perilous than forcing our way into the northern glacial immortal palace, and even a high zenith cultivator isn't guaranteed to be able to make the journey safely. Having said that, it's said that the Reincarnation Palace has carved out a relatively safe passageway through primordial land, but I don't know where this route is, Taoist Huyen replied. Han Li nodded in response. It seemed that Worm 3 had been telling him the truth. Fellow Taoist Li, the perils of the primordial land come primarily from how uncharted and unexplored it is. Many cultivators have tried to cross through it in the past, but most of them haven't lived to tell the tale, so I advise you not to pursue that path unless it's absolutely necessary, Yun Nai cautioned. Thank you for the advice, fellow Taoists. I'll be sure to consider this matter carefully. May I ask what your plans are from here onward? Now that your identities have been exposed, I'm sure the heavenly court will be coming after you as well, Han Li said. We'll be sure to be on our guard as well, so there's no need for you to worry about us. To tell you the truth, Tao Lord Bailey has already taken the High Zenith stage, and a breakthrough to the High Zenith stage is imminent for him. Once that time comes, we won't have to fear any immortal envoys, Taoist Huyen replied. In that case, I'll be offering my congratulations to Tao Lord Bailey in advance, Han Li said with a smile. At the moment, Tao Lord Bailey is working on refining the High Zenith pill, so he won't be able to come out of seclusion to see you. However, he's also very interested in you, so if we get a chance to meet again in the future, let's all share a drink together, Taoist Huyen said with a wide smile. That sounds great to me, Han Li replied with a smile. After that, the three of them began to discuss the state of the northern glacial Immortal region and what the future likely held, following which the conversation shifted to sharing cultivation insights and experiences. The jar of wine was quickly finished, but Taoist Hu Yan had a virtually endless stash of fine wines, and he immediately brought out a new jar. The time flew by in a flash, and before long, day had already transitioned into night. Three of them were thoroughly enjoying one another's company, and they were reluctant to part ways, but it was time to say their goodbyes. It's about time that we left, fellow Taoist Li. Look after yourself, Taoist Hu Yan declared as he cupped his fist in a parting salute. Same to you, fellow Taoists, Han Li replied with a nod. Taoist Hu Yan stowed the table and chairs away, then swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of fiery red light that encompassed both himself and Yun Nai. The two of them then rose up into the sky before flying toward the setting sun in the distance, quickly fading out of sight. Han Li stood with his hands clasped behind his back, while his robes flapped audibly around him in the wind, remaining as still as a statue as he looked on at the setting sun. A short while later, he swept a sleeve through the air to summon the green jade flying carriage, then sped away in another direction. Heavenly Cloud City, ancient cloud continent. It was the end of another year. For cultivators, this was just another insignificant moment in their long and busy lives, but for mortals, this was the most important time of the year. Light snow was falling from the sky, and aside from some inns and taverns inhabited by cultivators, the rest of the city was completely covered in a blanket of snow. In accordance with an old tradition passed down from time immemorial, newly cut down peach tree branches were stuck into the snow between the window frames, while vibrant and colorful couplets had been stuck onto the door frames. The sun had already set, and dusk was transitioning into night. On a street to the east of Heavenly Cloud City, all of the shops had put up large red lanterns, illuminating the entire street with a festive red glow. There was steam rising up all over the street as all types of hot foods were being sold, and all of the merchants were loudly advertising their wares, giving the street a lively and bustling atmosphere. A petite and beautiful young woman wearing a red cloak was currently slowly walking along the street with a delectable tanghulu in her hand. Her entire face was concealed within the large hood of her cloak, and there was a lonesome look on her face. Big Brother and the others aren't here, and Master Li is still gone. I'm all alone, she sighed to herself in a dejected voice before taking a bite out of her tanghulu. Right at this moment, she suddenly raised her head, and she spotted a tall, azure-robed man at the end of the street, approaching her with a smile on his face. Her eyes instantly sprang wide open with incredulity, and she hurriedly swallowed the mouthful of tanghulu before hurriedly rushing over to him. Only when she had almost reached him did she notice that there was an adorable little girl by his side, grabbing onto his robe with both hands as she looked around with a curious expression. Master Li. The young woman immediately removed her hood upon reaching the azure-robed man, then extended a respectful curtsy. The man was none other than Han Li, who had traveled all the way here from the primordial wave continent, while the woman was Ming Cayan. No need for formalities. I entered the city through the eastern gate, and I just so happened to sense your aura, so I came to pay you a visit, Han Li said with a smile. Jin Tong's gaze had been drawn to all of the food being sold along the street, but she turned her attention to Ming Cayan before pursing her lips slightly in disdain as she asked, "Who's this, uncle? Her cultivation base is so low, and her aptitude is also terrible." An exasperated look appeared on Han Li's face as he scolded, "Don't be so rude. She's your junior martial sister." Ming Cayan lowered her head in a slightly embarrassed manner, then said, "It's a pleasure to meet you, senior martial sister." I have a junior martial sister now. Jin Tong immediately exclaimed in delight, then summoned a vial of pills before tossing them at Ming Cayan. Here, this is for you. None of the mortals dared to stop and stare at Han Li's trio, but Han Li could tell that they were all sneaking furtive glances their way, so he said, "Let's get back to the Moonview Forest first. I have some things to tell you." "Yes, Master Li," Ming Cayan hurriedly replied. "It smells so good here. I want to eat first before we go," Jin Tong protested as she caught a whiff of the fragrant aroma wafting out of a nearby restaurant. Han Li naturally didn't dare to leave her here on her own. If she were left unchecked, she could easily eat the entire city. Hence, he had no choice but to comply with her demands. "All right, let's have some food then. It's been a long time since I've had mortal food myself." "Which shop has the best food?" Jin Tong asked in an eager voice, and she was barely able to contain her own salivation. "Are there any larger restaurants nearby?" Han Li asked as he turned to Ming Cayan, who hurriedly nodded in response. "There are 2 large restaurants nearby. I can take you to them right away." He had explored the city quite extensively during her time here, so she was very familiar with the food being sold here, and she immediately led Han Li and Jin Tong to the nearest large restaurant. However, Jin Tong was already unable to wait any longer, and she was drawn to a steamed bun stall on the side of the street. "The steamed lamb buns here are quite popular. We can have some of them first," Ming Cayan suggested. Han Li nodded in response, and the 3 of them sat down at the stall. The stall waiter could tell that these 3 were no ordinary customers, and he hurriedly rushed over to them with a warm smile as he asked, "What would you like to order? Our steamed lamb buns are the best in the city." "We'll have 3 steamers of lamb buns and 3 bowls of lamb offal soup," Meng Cayan ordered as she pulled out a silver ingot. "Coming right up," the waiter declared before departing, and it didn't take long before the order was brought to the table. Jin Tong was already at her limit, and she grabbed into a steamed lamb bun, which was even larger than both of her hands combined, then sank her teeth into it. The soft and sumptuous steamed bun instantly split open, and the golden soup inside spilled into her mouth, bringing with it a delectably meaty aroma. A blissful look appeared on her face as she began to munch down the steamed bun at an incredible speed. The waiter was very alarmed to see this, fearing that she would burn herself on the piping hot steamed buns, but before he had a chance to say anything, the first bun was already finished, and Jin Tong wiped the oil from her lips before stuffing a second bun into her mouth. As she ate, her movements became faster and faster, and by the end, it was as if the steamed buns were being zapped out of existence, vanishing into thin air one after another. All the while, the waiter gawked on with his mouth agape. "These steamed lamb buns are incredible, uncle. Get me 100, no, 1,000 steamers of these," Jin Tong yelled with an ecstatic expression. Not only was the waiter completely rooted to the spot, even the other diners had all turned to look at her. "Are they really that good?" Han Li chuckled. "They are," Jin Tong insisted as she smacked her lips. "How many more steamed buns do you have?" "We'll take them all," Han Li said as he turned to the waiter with a smile. The waiter was still reeling from what he had seen, so he didn't reply right away. Han Li thought that the waiter was concerned that he wouldn't have enough money to pay for the meal, and he was just about to pull out some silver when he realized that he didn't have a single tael of silver on him, only a mountain of immortal origin stones. Ironically, he was too rich to afford food in this city. Meng Cayan immediately came to his rescue, flipping a hand over to place a mid-grade spirit stone onto the table. Compared with the mortals of the spirit realm and the mortal realm, those of the northern glacial immortal region generally lived longer and were healthier. Even though the most commonly used forms of currency among them were still silver and gold, They were not unfamiliar with immortal currencies like spirit stones. Spirit stones contain the world's origin chi, so even though a mortal couldn't directly absorb spiritual power from them, they could still carry spirit stones around to extend their lifespans and improve their health. Hence, spirit stones were a type of premium currency that was extremely sought after among the upper class. However, the spirit stone that Ming Cayan had just pulled out was of a far better quality than normal spirit stones, making it a very rare sight in the mortal world, and it instantly attracted everyone's attention. Thankfully, the female boss of the stall had also had her attention drawn to Han Li's table by all the commotion, and after taking a glance at the mid-grade spirit stone on the table, she knew that it was her lucky day. She immediately hurried over to the table with a wide smile as she said, "I'm extremely honored that you think so highly of my steamed buns, esteemed customers, but this spirit stone is far too precious for me." Despite what she was saying, she had already silently slipped the spirit stone into her pocket. After that, she declared that her stall was closed for business, then respectfully urged everyone to return the next day. All of the other customers could also tell that Han Li's trio were no ordinary people, so they duly obliged. Only as they turned their attention back to their own tables did they realize that all of their steamed buns had already disappeared. "This stuff tastes much better than treasures," Jin Tong exclaimed with an ecstatic expression. "Senior Marshal Sister, you normally eat treasures?" Ming Cayan asked with a stunned expression. "Of course," Jin Tong replied as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "What other good stuff is there to eat?" "There's a ton of delicious food being sold on this street," Ming Cayan hurriedly replied, then began to rattle off a list of available foods, while Jin Tong listened with a pair of enraptured eyes. "I don't know what any of those things are, but they all sound really delicious. Let's finish up here, then take me to the next shop," she urged as she wiped away the drool that was threatening to dribble down her chin. Right at this moment, the waiter arrived at the table with 10 more steamers of buns, all of which were sucked into Jin Tong's belly in an instant. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he took a sip of his lamb offal soup. The soup was a little murky, and it was very flavorful, and it filled his stomach with a sense of gentle warmth. This was something that he hadn't experienced in a very long time. Han Li had already forgot the last time he had enjoyed such mortal delicacies, and that sip of soup instantly sent him on a trip down memory lane, evoking memories of the small village in the mortal realm that had been his first home. He looked around at the lively and bustling street, and he couldn't help but heave an internal sigh. Having spent all his time cultivating, a change of scenery was quite a pleasant experience. It was all hands on deck in the kitchen of the steamed bun shop, as steamer after steamer of freshly cooked steamed lamb buns were brought to Han Li's table one after another. Jin Tong was eating non-stop, and it didn't take long before she had gobbled down 70 steamers of buns, while a small crowd of astonished onlookers had gathered nearby. Han Li didn't want to attract excessive attention, so even though Jin Tong was still eager for more, he dragged her away to the next shop, this one a Xiaobing shop. The shop was run by only 2 people, an elderly man who was close to 80 years of age and his grandson. As a result, they were unable to churn out Xiaobing as quickly as the steamed bun shop, and it didn't take long before they ran out of food to serve Jin Tong. Xiaobing was one of the most commonplace food items in the mortal world, but the elderly man had over 60 years of experience in cooking Xiaobing, and during that time, he had made many innovations to the simple dish, setting his Xiaobing apart from the rest. Jin Tong was thoroughly impressed, and she immediately declared that the elderly man had to be rewarded, a request that Ming Cayan happily obliged. This was the first time that the elderly man had sold so many Xiaobing in one night, and he could tell Jin Tong truly loved his food, so he was also extremely pleased, praising Jin Tong for her voracious appetite. After the bill was paid, Ming Cayan took Jin Tong to eat glutinous rice balls cooked in fermented wine. Thankfully, the shopkeeper of the stall had already prepared a large pot full of rice balls with all types of fillings, and the entire pot of rice balls was purchased by Han Li. It didn't take long before news of Jin Tong's extraordinary feats of consumption spread across the entire street. As a result, all of the shopkeepers were urging their chefs to cook up as much food as humanly possible in anticipation for Jin Tong's visit. They had even set up tables on the street outside, and whatever food that was churned out was immediately carried out of the kitchen and onto the tables. Jin Tong was ecstatic to see this, and she swept through the street like a hurricane, eating everything in her wake while Han Li Ming Cayan footed the bill. Deep into the night, all of the shops that had been visited by Jin Tong had already run out of food and closed for the night, while the rest of the shops that she was still yet to visit were still open, and there were many shopkeepers standing on the street outside, eagerly awaiting her arrival. It was said that not only did Jin Tong possess an extraordinary appetite, she was also extremely generous, and anyone who could serve up food that was to her liking would be rewarded. Furthermore, as opposed to silver, her rewards were issued in the form of mid-grade spirit stones, with some shops even receiving high-grade spirit stones, which were extremely sought after even among cultivators. Ming Cayan didn't have much savings to begin with, and it didn't take long before she ran out of money. Before she even had a chance to say anything, Han Li casually tossed a storage pouch at her. As soon as she inspected the pouch's contents with her spiritual sense, she was instantly rooted to the spot. The pouch was filled with over 10,000 top-grade spirit stones. Han Li had taken the storage pouch from one of the golden immortals that he had slain in the infernal frost immortal manner, and in this rare moment of relaxation, he was more than happy to spend some money so that Jin Tong could enjoy a good time. Finally, the three of them arrived at one of the large restaurants that Ming Cayan mentioned, and the shopkeeper was a short man dressed in a silken robe. As soon as Han Li's trio arrived at the entrance of the restaurant, he immediately rushed out before greeting them with a wide smile. Han Li noticed that the shopkeeper was a late Foundation establishment cultivator, and he asked, "Do you have any vacant seats upstairs?" "Certainly, please come with me, esteemed customers," the shopkeeper immediately replied before leading the way up the stairs. Upon reaching the upper floor, Han Li discovered that it was still brightly lit, but there weren't any other customers inside, perhaps because it was too late at night, or perhaps the entire floor had been vacated by the shopkeeper in anticipation for Jin Tong's visit. The three of them took a seat by a window-side table, following which Ming Cayan instructed, "Fill all of these tables with your finest dishes and wine." The shopkeeper was ecstatic to hear this, and he immediately gave an affirmative response before rushing downstairs. Meanwhile, Jin Tong was still holding a large cake in her hands, and for some reason, she was only taking small bites out of it at a time with a blissful look on her little face. "Why are you the only one here? Where is your brother?" Han Li suddenly asked as he turned to Ming Cayan. Ming Cayan's expression stiffened slightly upon hearing this, and she hurriedly replied, "My apologies, Master Li, I completely forgot about that. My brother has returned to the late-age nation with everyone else." Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and he felt like this name was rather familiar. Ming Cayan was feeling a little uneasy at the sight of Han Li's furrowed brows. "The late-age nation is where you and your brother originally came from, right?" Han Li asked. "That's right. After Brother Sun progressed to the soul formation stage, he wanted to return to the late-age nation to avenge his clan. My brother couldn't dissuade him, so he decided to go with him," Ming Cayan replied. As the two of them were speaking, All manners of dishes and wine were being brought to the surrounding tables, and there were also waiters standing beside each table, introducing the dishes on their respective tables. Jin Tong was the only one eating, while Han Li and Ming Cayan remained seated at their table. Ming Cayan was feeling a little uneasy at Han Li's silence, and she said, "Master Li, their intention was never to disobey your orders. It's just that. We didn't know how to contact you, so please don't be displeased with them. Brother Sun always acts like he doesn't have a care in the world, but in reality, this has been weighing on his heart this entire time. Otherwise, with his personality, he wouldn't have worked so hard in his cultivation all this time. It's fine. I never forbade you to go and seek vengeance. It's just that you have to ensure that you possess sufficient power before you attempt to do so. I only came back to Heavenly Cloud City this time as I have some things to tell you and the others," Han Li said with a dismissive wave of his hand. Meng Cayan's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, and she prompted, "Please go ahead, Master Li." "It's nothing major. It's just that I'm going to be leaving the northern glacial Immortal region soon, and I don't know how long it'll be before I return. All of us were brought together by fate, so it wouldn't feel right to leave without making some arrangements for all of you," Han Li explained. "You're leaving, Master Li. Why don't you take us with you? We may not be very useful, but at the very least, we'll be able to perform some servant duties for you during your travels," Meng Cayan hurriedly said. "It's going to be a very perilous trip, so I can't take all of you with me. I've already prepared some pills, treasures, and cultivation arts for you and the others, and they're all here in this storage bracelet. Seeing as they're not here at the moment, I'll get you to pass these on to them when they get back," Han Li said. Meng Cayan was slightly dejected upon hearing this, but didn't say anything further. Additionally, there are 30 masks in this storage bracelet, all of which are exceptional aura concealment tools, and they've been specially treated to alter some of the restrictions within them. There's a jade slip inside that tells you how to use the masks, and you can bring out these masks in your times of need to alter your appearances and auras for concealment purposes," Han Li continued. He flipped a hand over as he spoke, summoning a white storage bracelet that he handed to Meng Cayan, who accepted the bracelet as she said, "Thank you for making such thorough preparations for us, Master Li. The entire northern glacial Immortal region is going to have to endure a period of turmoil soon, and a storm is coming. Once Yungui and the others get back, all of you must set off for Dark Vale Island in the Black Wind Sea right away. I've already arranged for someone to meet you there," Han Li said. "Yes, Master Li," Meng Cayan immediately replied. The two of them paused momentarily to take a look around, at which point they discovered that all of the surrounding tables had already been cleared out by Jin Tong. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he flipped a hand over to produce a flagon of wine that had been given to him by Taoist Hu Yan, and he poured a cup of wine each for himself and Meng Cayan, then raised his own cup to take a sip. Meng Cayan hurriedly accepted her cup with both hands, then took a gentle whiff of the wine's aroma, but she refrained from drinking the wine as she stared at Han Li, who was looking out the window. It was getting quite deep into the night, and a veil of moonlight was draped over the roof of the restaurant, giving it a rather cold appearance. Han Li was looking up at the moon in the sky as he pondered the journey that he was about to embark upon. Right at this moment, his brows suddenly furrowed slightly, and he spotted a shadow plummeting into the city. Immediately thereafter, Meng Cayan also sensed something, and her expression instantly changed slightly. "Let's go," Han Li immediately said. Meng Cayan hurriedly nodded in response, then summoned a spirit stone before placing it onto the table. Han Li immediately grabbed into Jin Tong, who was still munching on a pair of pig trotters, then grabbed onto Meng Cayan's shoulder with his other hand, and the three of them instantly vanished into thin air. Immediately thereafter, they appeared in the Moonview forest. There were many restrictions littered throughout the forest, but they completely failed to register their intrusion. After entering a courtyard in Area A, Hanley spotted the figure that had just plummeted out of the sky. It was a large azure bird with its entire body riddled with wounds. The bird seemed to have spotted Hanley's trio as well, and its eyes immediately lit up as it began squawking at them in a feeble voice. "Feather-urn," Ming Cayan exclaimed as she hurriedly flew over to the large bird, while Hanley set down Jin Tong before making his way toward the bird as well. Jin Tong was naturally very displeased to have suddenly been dragged here in the middle of her meal, and she was just about to complain when she spotted the injured bird. She immediately gobbled down the rest of her greasy pig trotters, then rubbed her hands together as a sinister smile appeared on her face. Feather-urn seemed to have detected her gaze, and it immediately pressed itself more tightly against Ming Cayan in a fearful manner. "What happened?" Hanley asked. "They told me not to come with them, but I was worried about them, so I sent Feather-urn to accompany them. At this point, it's already at the grand ascension stage, so I thought they would definitely be safe, but something must have happened to them," Ming Cayan murmured with a distressed expression. Hanley cast his gaze toward Feather-urn, then communicated with it momentarily using his spiritual sense before declaring, "Yunggui and the others have been trapped in a restricted area of the late-age nation's imperial palace, and Feather-urn fled back here to inform you of this." Ming Cayan's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, following which she implored, "Master Li, please allow me to go and save my brother." Han Li was rather taken aback to hear this, and he asked, "Why aren't you asking me to help you save them? I may not be very smart, but I know that your departure from the northern glacial Immortal region cannot be delayed. I'm already extremely grateful that you went out of your way to come and see us, and it would be far too greedy of me to delay your departure any longer," Ming Cayan hurriedly replied. If Feather-urn was so severely injured even after reaching the grand ascension stage, then you're surely no match for these enemies. How can you expect to save them? Also, the late-age nation is quite far away, so how do you know that they'll be able to last until you get to them?" Hanley asked. Ming Cayan had no response to this. "Let's go, it won't take much time," Hanley said. Before Ming Cayan had a chance to reply, Jin Tong had already approached them, and there was still some oil on her lips as she assured, "You can count on me to look after this injured bird, uncle." All of the feathers on Feather-urn's entire body instantly stood up on end at the sight of the approaching Jin Tong, and it desperately tried to get away, but it was too severely injured to do so. "You're not planning to eat it, are you?" Hanley asked with an exasperated expression. "Of course not. I'm going to treat its injuries. I've been reading all of the scriptures in the storage bracelet that you gave me," Jin Tong immediately complained with an indignant expression. "I didn't think you would be interested in reading. I thought you were only interested in eating," Hanley chuckled with an amused expression. "Don't look down on me, uncle. While I was reading the scriptures, I discovered that I already knew some of the things outlined inside. That must mean that I have talent," Jin Tong protested in an indignant manner. "All right, then how are you going to look after Feather-urn?" Hanley asked. "That's simple," Jin Tong replied with a proud expression, then summoned a pill before stuffing it into Feather-urn's beak. Feather-urn swallowed the pill, but it was still staring at Jin Tong with an alert and fearful expression. Jin Tong pursed her lips in disdain as she scoffed, "You're so weak and frail, unlike my Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai, where are you? Are you slacking off again?" Her gaze fell upon the miniature white jade Pixiu, hanging from Han Li's waist as she spoke. "Leave me alone," the Pixiu groaned. "I'm calling you so you can come and eat with me, you ungrateful little bastard," Jin Tong scolded. "I have no interest in mortal food," the Pixiu replied. "You'd better not regret this," Jin Tong threatened in a grumpy manner, to which the Pixiu gave no response. With that brief interlude, the tense atmosphere instantly lightened up significantly, and Hanley flipped a hand over to produce a few more pills, then instructed Ming Cayan to feed them to Featheryarn. "I already know the location. Stay here and rest," Hanley said to Featheryarn, then swept a sleeve through the air to summon the green jade flying carriage. After that, he swept his other sleeve through the air to carry Ming Cayan and Jin Tong on the carriage, following which he sped away into the night sky, quickly vanishing into the distance. The Late Age Nation. The gates of the capital city, Bright Cloud City, had been tightly shut for many days, and all of the city's residents had also been prohibited from leaving their homes. At the moment, it was very late at night, and the streets in the city were very peaceful. There weren't even many lit houses, and if it weren't for some of the armor-clad soldiers littered throughout the streets and alleys, one could easily mistake the city as one that was deserted. In contrast with the deathly silence inside the city, the imperial palace situated in the southern part of the city was brightly lit and constantly being patrolled by imperial guards, while the imperial garden at the back of the palace had been surrounded by multiple protective encirclements. The encirclements were formed by hundreds of people, all of whom were cultivators. They were led by a tall and thin purple-robed elderly man, whose aura indicated that he was a mid-spatial tempering cultivator. He was the patriarch of the Su clan, the cultivating clan that was currently controlling the Late Age Nation from the shadows. At this moment, his brows were tightly furrowed, and he was clearly not very pleased. Half a month ago, a descendant of the Late Age Nation's former imperial clan had stormed into the imperial palace with some members of the Yun clan, and they had collaborated with some officials of the past imperial court to stage a surprise coup. By the time he made an emergency exit from seclusion, over half of the Su clan's cultivators had been killed or wounded. On top of that, the puppet emperor that they were supporting had been constantly indulging himself in wine, extravagant food, and debauchery, and he had been so frightened that he had died from a heart attack. After settling the unrest in his clan, he had immediately come to the imperial palace to face the intruders in battle. However, the intruders were both using cultivation arts of a far higher caliber than his, and they also had a seemingly endless supply of treasures at their disposal, so he was unable to defeat them, even though his cultivation base far surpassed theirs. What was even more astonishing to him was that they were accompanied by a grand ascension stage bird, which had almost killed him on the spot. If it weren't for the timely arrival of his backers, he would already be dead by now. "Esteemed Patriarch, those scoundrels have already been hiding in this dried well for 2 days. We've been chipping away this entire time at the restrictions that they've set up, and we should be able to break through them in just 4 more hours. A middle-aged man with a black mole on his face reported to the elderly man in a respectful manner. The Yun clan was a very formidable force in our Late Age Nation for many years, and those restrictions are not to be underestimated. Make sure to be on your guard at all times and ensure that they don't make it out of here alive," Su Shu instructed with a dark expression. "If our savior hadn't gone to pursue that demon beast, he could have easily broken those restrictions," the middle-aged man complained. Su Shu was just about to scold him for his untoward remarks when he suddenly looked up into the night sky, where a streak of yellow light flashed through the air before landing beside the dried well. Su Shu and the others immediately extended respectful bows as they greeted in unison, "Welcome back, esteemed savior." The yellow light faded to reveal a yellow-robed young man with a set of unremarkable features, and he took a glance at the middle-aged man, who was knelt down beside Su Shu, following which a cold gleam flashed through his eyes as he decapitated the man with a casual sweep of his hand. Su Shu's entire body was splattered with the man's blood, but he only flinched slightly and didn't dare to move even a single inch. The young man drew the middle-aged man's nascent soul into his hand, then casually crushed it in his hand. Earlier, he had set off to pursue that strange azure bird, but it was even faster than a late Grand Ascension cultivator, so he was unable to catch it, and that had left him in a very foul mood. He was looking for someone to vent his fury on, and the middle-aged man had made those careless remarks at the worst possible time. "How are things going?" the young man asked. "The restrictions will be broken in just 4 more hours," Su Shu hurriedly replied. "I don't have time for that. After I take care of things here, I have to get back to the sect. From this day forth, the annual offerings that your Su clan must submit to our Stone Ditch Palace will be doubled," the young man said, and Su Shu's heart immediately sank upon hearing this. The Su clan had taken over the late-age nation as there was a Sunray sand mine here, and most of the profits made from that mine had to be submitted to the Stone Ditch Palace. Now that the mandatory offerings had been doubled, there was no profit for them to be made at all. "Is there a problem?" the young man asked as he raised an eyebrow. "Not at all, esteemed savior," Su Shu hurriedly replied. The young man paid no further heed to him as he swept a hand through the air, and a yellow paper talisman appeared on each of his fingers. After chanting a brief incantation, the 5 talismans erupted into flames, then shot forth toward the opening of the well as 5 bursts of flames of different colors. A burst of yellow light flashed over the entrance of the well, and a formation that had been set up around the well was activated, working with the 5 bursts of flames to attack the opening of the well. A resounding boom rang out as a golden light barrier appeared over the opening of the well, only to then explode an instant later. Immediately thereafter, 7 or 8 streaks of light of different colors shot out of the well, then rose up into the sky like fireworks before flying away in different directions. However, before they had a chance to disperse, a giant 5-colored umbrella descended out of the sky, revolving on the spot while releasing a burst of invisible suction force to reel in all of the streaks of light, revealing them to be a group of cultivators. The cultivators of the Su clan immediately surrounded the group of cultivators, and all of them were holding weapons with sinister grins on their faces. Standing beside the well was an azure-robed young man with a crescent-shaped jade pendant hanging from his waist. Beside him was another young man who appeared to be of similar age and was built like a brick wall. These two were none other than Meng Yungui and Sun Buzhang, while the ones around them were Meng Xiang and the others, and all of them were severely injured. Sun Buzhang was quite severely wounded, and his face was deathly pale. His voice was rather unsteady as he said, "I owe you for getting us into this mess, Yungui, but it looks like I won't be able to repay you this lifetime. Let's be brothers again in our next lives." Meng Yungui heaved a concerned sigh upon hearing this. How is Cayan going to be able to fare on her own? The guilt on Sun Buzhang's face became even more pronounced upon hearing this, and he gritted his teeth tightly. The young man withdrew his 5-colored umbrella, then pointed his thumb at himself as he declared, "Don't be in such a hurry to decide your own fate. Whether you live or die is up to me. If you're going to kill us, then do it. Stop wasting time," Sun Buzhang yelled in a furious voice. "Tell me where you came from. How did you obtain all of those powerful treasures, and what's the deal with that bird? If you answer these questions truthfully, perhaps I'll find it in the kindness of my heart to spare one of you," the young man said. Sun Buzhang's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. If possible, he wanted Meng Yungui to survive. "So you want to kill us, but you're afraid of our backers, and you want to know who they are before you kill us and get rid of the evidence, right? Save your energy. We're not going to say anything," Meng Yungui declared in a resilient voice. "I gave you a chance, but you didn't want it, so you can't blame me," the young man said with a sinister smile, then tossed his 5-colored umbrella up into the air with a flick of his wrist, and it rose up into the sky to encompass everyone from above. The runes on the umbrella were flashing incessantly, while countless bursts of five-colored light emerged over the umbrella's frame, then shot down toward Meng Yungui and the others like a storm of five-colored needles. Meng Yungui was calmly prepared to face his death, and his final thought was still of his sister. Right as everyone thought that everything was about to come to an end, the five-colored umbrella hanging in the sky suddenly shuddered violently, following which it was forcibly closed, shutting in all of the five-colored needles of light before the umbrella was sent flying even higher up into the sky. Immediately thereafter, a hand reached out to grab onto the umbrella, and with just a casual swipe, its connection to its former owner was completely erased. The young man gave a muffled groan as he looked up into the sky with shock and horror in his eyes. A green jade flying carriage had appeared in the night sky up above, atop which stood three figures. "Master Li, Ming Cayan," Meng Yungui immediately exclaimed in an ecstatic voice. Sun Bajing and the others were also ecstatic, and tears were beginning to well up in Meng Sheng's eyes. "We pay our respects to Master Li," all of them declared in unison as they fell to their knees. "You did very well, Yungui," Han Li said with a nod of approval. Meng Yungui didn't know what Han Li was referring to, and a perplexed look appeared on his face, but Sun Bajing knew that he was being praised for refusing to reveal his own identity even in the face of death. With that in mind, a hint of lingering fear welled up in his heart. If he had let slip even a single word of information earlier, then they would have most likely all been left here to die. "Big brother," Meng Yungui called out as she flew down from the carriage before descending by Meng Yungui's side, then pulled a white jade vial that had been given to her by Han Li and tipped a few yellow pills from within before handing them out to everyone. Just a moment ago, the young man had been confident and assured, but now there was a fearful look on his face, and Su Shu and the others were so terrified that they didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. "You're from the Stone Ditch Palace, is that right?" Han Li asked as he glanced at the young man's attire. The young man forcibly composed himself, then replied, "Yes, Senior, my name is Luo Hua, and I am an outer sect disciple of the Stone Ditch Palace." Even though he was only at the pinnacle of the Grand Ascension stage, he had seen extremely powerful figures during his time in the Stone Ditch Palace, and he knew that there was no way he could contend against this man, so he didn't even try to put up any resistance. To his surprise, Han Li suddenly asked, "Do you know Gao Sheng?" Luo Hua faltered slightly upon hearing this, then asked, "Are you referring to Elder Gao Sheng, who once served in the Immortal Palace?" "All I know is that he once served at an ascension platform," Han Li replied. "That's him. Elder Gao Sheng disappeared several hundred years ago, and our sect has expended a huge amount of resources to try and find him, but to no avail so far," Luo Hua explained in a fearful manner. "He disappeared. How?" Han Li asked as his brows furrowed slightly. "I'm but a mere outer sect disciple, so my knowledge of the circumstances surrounding Elder Gao Sheng's disappearance is very limited. Please forgive me, Senior," Luo Hua replied in an uneasy manner. Han Li was unconvinced, and he reached out with one hand before making a grabbing motion, upon which Luo Hua was forcibly wrenched up from the ground. Han Li caught him by the throat, and he struggled violently with a horrified look on his face as he pleaded, "Please spare me, Senior." Han Li extended a finger forward in an expressionless manner, and a burst of light emerged over his fingertip as he tapped it against Luo Hua's glabella to employ a soul search technique. He then raised an eyebrow as he discovered that there was a restriction in Luo Hua's consciousness that was impeding his spiritual sense. Of course, this posed no obstacle to him, and as soon as he channeled his spirit refinement technique, the restriction in Luo Hua's mind instantly faded away. After searching through Luo Hua's memories for a moment, A furious look appeared on Han Li's face, and the light glowing from his fingertip became even brighter. Initially, there had been a horrified look on Luo Hua's face, but his eyes quickly rolled over into the back of his head, and he began drooling in a slack-jawed manner. His expressions became stranger and stranger until finally, he fainted altogether. Han Li gave a cold harumph upon seeing this, then slapped him with such tremendous force that his body was completely embedded into his ground. Not only had he been reduced to a pile of mincemeat, even his nascent soul, which had already been stripped of its spiritual nature by Han Li's spirit refinement technique, was completely shattered as well. Su Shu and the others were astonished to see this. In their eyes, Luo Hua had been an almighty deity, yet it was clear that this dark-skinned young man was countless times more powerful than he was, and they couldn't and didn't even dare to imagine just how lofty his cultivation base was. At this moment, all of them were knelt down onto the ground, and they were trembling uncontrollably as cold sweat poured down their faces. Han Li had become so incensed because Luo Hua had been blatantly lying to his face. He wasn't just some ordinary outer sect disciple, as he proclaimed. Instead, he was one of the disciples of the Stone Ditch Palace specifically assigned with the task of gathering intelligence, and he had only come to the Late Age Nation during the course of his investigation of Gao Sheng's disappearance. After that, he discovered that there was a sunrise sand mine here, and in order to claim it for himself, he assisted the Su clan in replacing the Yun clan and destroying the Sun clan to take over the nation. As for Gao Sheng, he was a direct disciple to the Stone Ditch Palace's Grand Elder, and his disappearance had created a massive stir in the sect. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance were indeed quite murky. All that the sect knew was that it had to do with a certain mysterious person, and there were portraits of that person circulating throughout the sect. That mysterious person was naturally none other than Han Li. There were many more intelligence-gathering disciples like Luo Hua, and they had been sent out several centuries ago to search for Gao Sheng. Hence, he had instantly identified Han Li as the mysterious figure depicted in the portraits. After killing Luo Hua, a hesitant look appeared on Han Li's face as he pondered whether he should make a trip to the Stone Ditch Palace to see if he could find any news about Gao Sheng. After all, the events that had unfolded several centuries ago were still a mystery to him. However, ultimately, he decided not to make such a detour. It had already been some time since he had left the infernal Frost Immortal Manor, and it most likely wasn't going to be long before the Heavenly Court made its move. His top priority right now was to leave this immortal region as soon as possible. With that in mind, Han Li pointed a finger at Su Shu, releasing a burst of azure light that instantly bound him to the spot. "I'm going to the mountain outside the city. You only have an hour," he declared, following which the green jade flying carriage vanished into thin air. "Thank you, Master Li," Sun Buzheng yelled as he knelt down in gratitude toward Han Li. Shortly thereafter, the sound of blood-curdling howls rang out as a slaughter ensued. "Li." On the mountain outside Bright Cloud City, Han Li was seated in a pavilion on the mountain summit, resting with his eyes closed. Jin Tong was seated on the ground with her legs crossed beside him, and she was holding a white longsword in her hands, which she was breaking up into pieces before eating. As she did this, her gaze was constantly roaming over her surroundings, and it seemed that she was quite interested in this area. Han Li opened his eyes, then flipped a hand over to produce a disc treasure. A hint of befuddlement appeared on his face at the sight of the peculiar patterns on the disc. Just now, as he was channeling his spirit refinement technique, the disc had suddenly reacted. After some contemplation, Han Li channeled his spirit refinement technique once again, and a cloud of white mist instantly rose up over the disc to encompass its entire surface. At the same time, a speck of pulsing red light emerged on the disc. Han Li withdrew his spirit refinement technique, and the speck of red light gradually faded. After repeating this experiment several times, it became apparent to Han Li that this disc was capable of detecting those using the spirit refinement technique nearby. He didn't know how large its sensory range was, but the fact that it came from a high zenith stage jade immortal like Gongshuju meant that it had to be quite a powerful treasure. In the future, he had to be careful when using the spirit refinement technique. Han Li exhaled as he stowed the disc away, and he suddenly heard the sound of gentle snoring ringing out from beside him. He turned to discover that Jin Tong had already fallen asleep while laying on the bench under the pavilion, and there was a faint smile on her face. Han Li tried to rouse Jin Tong from her slumber through their spiritual connection, but she displayed no signs of waking up, so he could only put her back into his spirit beast pouch. The breeze blowing over the mountain was very cool and refreshing, and the sun was already beginning to rise in the distance. A short while later, Meng Yunggui and the others arrived on the mountain summit to meet Han Li. He told them the same thing that he had already informed Ming Cayan of earlier, then departed on his own without lingering any longer, leaving Ming Cayan to look on with a sullen expression. Master Li's cultivation base seems to have advanced even further. I think he's become even more powerful than the golden immortal state, Dao Lords of the Blaze Dragon Dao. Sun Buzheng murmured unadulterated admiration in his eyes. That's why we need to work even harder in our cultivation. We may not be able to help him in the future, but we definitely can't weigh him down, Meng Cayan said. Cayan's right. We definitely can't put ourselves in a position where Master Li has to come and save us again. Once everything is settled in Bright Cloud City, let's follow Master Li's instructions and travel to the Black Wind Sea right away, Meng Yunggui said. Ali. A month later, in the sky above a boundless blue sea, a streak of azure light was racing through the clouds, doing so at such an incredible speed that it was impossible to track with the naked eye. However, after flying for some time, the carriage drew to an abrupt halt. Han Li was standing atop the carriage in his usual azure robe, holding a shimmering golden spirit beast pouch. A surprised look flashed through his eyes as he opened the spirit beast pouch, and a mountainous golden beetle instantly emerged from within. It was none other than Jin Tong in her true form, and her entire body was glowing with radiant golden light. Furthermore, his entire body was riddled with countless peculiar patterns that were giving off a terrifying aura. However, Han Li noticed that the beetle's eyes were still closed, indicating that it was still sleeping. Through raising gold devouring beetles back in the spirit realm, he learned that they evolved by devouring one another. But it seemed that Jin Tong was currently on the cusp of a breakthrough after devouring a large number of treasures. No wonder her aura's been fluctuating unsteadily ever since she ate that cauldron, Han Li thought to himself, and the concern in his heart faded away as he sensed Jin Tong's steadily rising aura. Right as he was about to set up a formation to conceal the signs of Jin Tong's breakthrough, its eyes abruptly sprang open, and a thunderous burp rang out. A pillar of translucent light that was over 1,000 feet in length then erupted out of its mouth, covering a distance of several hundred kilometers in the blink of an eye. The sea down below was completely parted by the pillar of light, to the extent that the entire seabed was revealed. Immediately thereafter, the golden light radiating from Jin Tong's body rapidly faded, and it quickly reverted back to a little girl. The little girl stretched lazily with a bleary look in her eyes, seemingly having only just woken up. Han Li was left feeling rather speechless upon seeing this. At this moment, her aura indicated that she was already at the late golden immortal stage. She had made a breakthrough just by eating some things and taking a nap. He knew that the key to Jin Tong's breakthrough had to have been that pill cauldron from the High Zenith Palace, while the other treasures that she devoured thereafter only had a secondary effect. It appeared that she had easily made this breakthrough, but in reality, she had devoured so much resources in the process that even the average high zenith stage Jade Immortal may not be able to support her. As Jin Tong finally woke up, her tummy began to grumble and she asked, "Is there anything to eat, uncle?" "Of course." Hanli flipped a hand over to produce a giant axe that was riddled with runes before handing it over to Jin Tong, and she grabbed onto the axe with both hands before sinking her teeth into it. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and he dragged Jin Tong back onto the carriage, then flipped a hand over to produce a white jade slip. Everything in the northern glacial immortal region had already been taken care of, so it was time for him to leave. But before that, there was one more place that he had to visit. With that in mind, he made a hand seal, and the green jade flying carriage quickly vanished into the distance as a streak of light. The Upper R continent was situated to the south of the northern glacial immortal region, and in contrast with the ancient cloud continent and the infernal frost continent, the climate here was very warm, so it was a continent that was thriving with vitality. There were countless lush forests and swamps that were teeming with snakes and ferocious beasts, making it unfit for mortal habitation. Hence, despite the continent's fertile lands and abundant resources, it only had a tiny population of mortals, far below that of the northern continents. Due to the abundance of spirit veins here, the continent was teeming with spiritual chi and all types of spirit plants and precious beasts, so there were many cultivating sects here. As the #1 spirit mountain range of the Upper R continent, the ancient Point Mountain Range was vastly renowned across the entire continent. However, what was even more renowned was the vast Flow Palace within the ancient Point Mountain Range. While Grand Palace Master Luo Qinghai was an almighty immortal who ranked alongside the likes of Bailey Yan of the Blaze Dragon Dao and Feng Tiandu of the Dawn Fall sect. The 5 extreme palace masters were also all golden immortals, and they presided over the 5 vast flow extreme palaces that were littered all over the continent. Aside from them, there were many more vastly renowned figures in the sect, but the vast Flow Palace had always liked to keep a low profile. Most of its members spent the majority of their time cultivating in seclusion, and they very rarely left the sect, so not much was known about the sect to outsiders. At this moment, a tall man with a thick beard was currently standing in the sky near the ancient Point Mountain Range. It was none other than Han Li in disguise. As he inspected the mountain range up ahead, he was recalling the information that he had gathered pertaining to the vast Flow Palace. From his perspective, the ancient Point Mountain Range was enshrouded in a mysterious veil of cloud and mist. The mountain range was filled with abundant spiritual chi, particularly that of the water attribute. A short while later, Han Li continued onward, and not long after he entered the ancient Point Mountain Range, a streak of blue light instantly flew out from within to greet him. It was a blue spirit boat shaped like a fish, and there were several vast Flow Palace disciples standing on it, led by a square-faced young man who appeared to be in his 20s. Judging from their attire, they appeared to be patrolling disciples of the vast Flow Palace, and all of them were at the deity transformation stage, while their leader was a spatial tempering cultivator. The square-faced young man was observing Han Li with a wary look in his eyes, but he still extended a respectful salute as he said, "I am Attendant Li Ang of the Outer Place. May I ask your name and the purpose for your visit, Senior?" Han Li wore a cold expression, and he didn't even take a single glance at these people before a burst of tremendous spiritual pressure erupted out of his body without any warning. The blue spirit boat was instantly sent flying like a leaf in a tornado, and all of the vast Flow Palace disciples on it threw up mouthfuls of blood before falling unconscious on the spot. Han Li continued onward without pause, but Li Ang was able to remain conscious, and he swept a sleeve through the air to send a burst of blue light erupting into the heavens as he yelled, "We're under enemy attack." A resounding boom rang out as the burst of blue light exploded in the sky before spreading outward in all directions. Han Li made no attempt to stop what he was doing. In fact, he didn't even bother to take a glance at Li Ang as he continued to fly onward. Immediately thereafter, countless streaks of light erupted out of all parts of the mountain range to stand in Han Li's path. These were all vast flow palace cultivators who possessed far superior cultivation bases to Li Ang, and they were led by a group of early and mid-true immortal cultivators. "Stop, who dares to encroach upon our vast flow palace?" an elderly man yelled in a furious voice. "Get Luo Qinghai to come out and see me," Han Li declared in an expressionless manner, following which a vast wave of azure light erupted out of his body, sending all of the surrounding cultivators flying through the air. Right at this moment, an extremely deep and resonant voice rang out. "Welcome, fellow Taoist. Please forgive these juniors for their rudeness. May I ask your name?" At the same time, a gentle breeze blew past, instantly scattering the wave of azure light. Han Li raised an eyebrow as he stopped in his tracks. Immediately thereafter, a blue-robed elderly man appeared not far in front of him. The man was quite tall, with a long beard that trailed all the way down to his chest, but his skin was dark green in color, presenting a rather peculiar sight to behold. The vast aura emanating from his body indicated that he was a golden immortal. Han Li took a glance at the elderly man, but offered no response. The elderly man wasn't bothered by this, and he cupped his fist in a salute as he said, "I don't think we've ever met before, fellow Taoist. What is the purpose of your visit?" "Get Luo Qinghai to come out and see me," Han Li repeated. "I'm afraid you haven't come at a good time, fellow Taoist. Palace Master Luo left the sect a very long time ago, and he still hasn't returned yet. If you have something important to discuss with him, you can leave a message with me, and I'll be sure to pass on the message once he returns. The Infernal Frost Immortal Palace has already closed, and I ran into Grand Palace Master Luo in Black Wind City some time ago. Back then, he had already set off back to the Vast Flow Palace. Surely you're not telling me that he still hasn't returned?" Han Li asked with a mocking sneer. The elderly man's expression stiffened slightly upon hearing this. "It's fine if Luo Qinghai doesn't want to meet me, but in that case, I'll have to advise your Vast Flow Palace to select 2 more extreme palace masters," Han Li continued with a cold smile. The elderly man's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. "What did you just say?" Meanwhile, everyone else was exchanging befuddled glances with one another. "I'll handle this, all of you can go now," the elderly man instructed. Everyone else was quite curious to see what was going to happen next, but they didn't dare to disobey the elderly man, and all of them promptly departed. "Please come with me, fellow Taoist," the elderly man said, then flew toward the Ancient Point mountain range. Han Li seemed to have already anticipated this response, and he followed along as a streak of azure light. It didn't take long before the two of them were deep in the mountain range, and at this point, the dense mist surrounding the mountains had vanished, revealing the mountain range in its full glory. There were countless mountains stretching as far as the eyes could see in all directions, and some buildings and restrictions were beginning to come into view. "We just passed through the outskirts of the Ancient Point mountain range. Only now have we entered the mountain range's inner sanctum, and this is where our Vast Flow Palace is located," the elderly man said as he continued to fly onward. Han Li casually took a glance at his surroundings in a completely expressionless manner, and the elderly man was left feeling a little deflated by his reaction. After flying for a while longer, Han Li suddenly spotted an enormous mountain up ahead that towered over all of its neighbors. It stretched all the way up into the heavens, and all of the mountains around it were made to resemble tiny hills. Han Li had witnessed quite a few majestic mountains in the past, but none that could compare with this one. The world's origin chi near the mountain was far more abundant than it was elsewhere, and there were countless palaces and pavilions constructed on the mountain, packed tightly together to resemble the interior of a beehive. The mountain summit was enshrouded within a huge white light barrier, and it was impossible to see into the light barrier or pass one's spiritual sense through it. I've heard that there are 19 enormous mountains referred to as the 19 holy peaks in the vast Flow Palace, and they are the places where the spirit veins of the ancient Point Mountain range converge. The first Grand Palace Master of the vast Flow Palace used the spiritual power of the 19 holy peaks as a foundation to create a secret area on each mountain summit, collectively known as the 19 holy areas. Which one of the 19 holy peaks is this one? Han Li suddenly asked. You're certainly very knowledgeable, fellow Taoist, the elderly man remarked with a surprised expression. This is the Light Conception Peak. Han Li nodded in response. Beside the Light Conception Peak was an extremely wide river that was flowing into the distance. The water in the river had a vibrant blue color and was giving off extremely abundant water attribute spiritual power, indicating that it was some type of true water rather than normal water. Through the scriptures that he had read back in the Blaze Dragon Tao and the soul search technique that he had performed on the elderly man, Han Li had learned many things about the vast Flow Palace. Beside each of the 19 holy peaks was a large river, and these rivers were referred to as the 19 true rivers. These weren't just ordinary rivers. Instead, the water within them had been converted into true water by the spirit veins in the ancient Point Mountain range, and the true water in each of the 19 true rivers possessed different properties from one another. The past cultivators of the vast Flow Palace had created countless water attribute cultivation arts and abilities based on these 19 true rivers, and they were an extremely important asset to the sect. As the two of them continued onward, they passed by several more holy peaks and true rivers, and Han Li could tell that all of the true rivers were converging to a single place. Close to an hour later, the elderly man suddenly stopped, and Han Li cast his gaze forward, upon which a surprised look appeared on his face. There was an enormous round crater in the ground up ahead, and it was tens of thousands of kilometers in size, resembling a vast pit that led all the way to the underworld. This was where the 19 true rivers converged, and all of them were flowing into the crater as 19 breathtaking waterfalls, presenting a marvelous spectacle to behold. The green-faced elderly man paused by the crater for a moment, as if he were intentionally showing Han Li the astonishing scenery here, and only after that did he begin to embark on a descent. Han Li withdrew his gaze and followed along, and it didn't take long before the two of them reached the bottom of the crater. At the bottom of the crater was a vast body of blue water. Even though there were 19 massive waterfalls pouring into the crater, the surface of the water was extremely calm without even the slightest wave to be seen, resembling an enormous blue gemstone. A blue palace was hovering in the air above the water, and the entire palace had been constructed out of some type of blue crystal. There were no visible seams or connective points on the entire palace, as if it had been carved out of a single vast crystal. The entire palace was riddled with spirit patterns that were glowing radiantly, and hanging directly above the entrance of the palace was a huge plaque that read, "Vast Flow Palace." The elderly man descended in front of the Vast Flow Palace with Han Li, and at this moment, there were already 6 or 7 other golden immortals gathered there, with Luo Qinghai present among them, and all of them were looking at Han Li with some degree of animosity in their eyes. In particular, there was a brawny man with a single blue horn on his forehead, and he was glowering at Han Li with a menacing expression. At the same time, all of them were exerting pressure upon Han Li by releasing their auras, clearly trying to intimidate him. I believe we had a brief encounter back in Wave View City, fellow Taoist. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you sooner, Luo Qinghai said as he approached Han Li with a smile. It appeared that all of the Vast Flow Palace's golden immortal cultivators were present, and this formidable lineup was a strong testament to the Vast Flow Palace's power as one of the top sects of the northern glacial immortal region. If none of the Vast Flow Palace's golden immortals had perished in the infernal frost immortal palace, then the number of golden immortals in the sect wouldn't have been inferior in the slightest to that of the Blaze Dragon Dao during its heyday, and 3 of the people present were at the mid-golden immortal stage, while Luo Qinghai was at the late golden immortal stage. The elderly man who had led Han Li was one of those mid-golden immortal cultivators, while the other 2 consisted of a blue-robed young woman and that brawny man with the horn on his head. In particular, the horned man's aura indicated that he had already reached the pinnacle of the mid-golden immortal stage, so he was only a step away from joining Luo Qinghai at the late golden immortal stage. Their collective auras formed a crushing wave of spiritual pressure that surged directly toward Han Li, but having already faced Gongshu Jiu in direct battle, this amount of spiritual pressure was certainly not enough to intimidate him. It sure is difficult trying to request an audience with you, Grand Palace Master Luo, Han Li said in an indifferent voice. It was clear that Han Li was completely unfazed by the surrounding spiritual pressure, and Luo Qinghai's eyes narrowed slightly upon seeing this, but his amicable smile remained unchanged as he explained. I was cultivating in seclusion in the sect, so I informed everyone that I wasn't going to meet with any visitors. Of course, you're an exception to that, fellow Taoist. Han Li merely smiled and offered no reply. Please come in and take a seat, fellow Taoist, Luo Qinghai said as he turned around to lead the way. Han Li paid no heed to the other golden immortals present as he entered the blue palace without any hesitation. All of the other golden immortals exchanged a few glances, then entered the palace as well. Inside the palace was a guest hall that was around 300 to 400 feet in size. The layout of the hall was very simple, with around a dozen blue jade pillars inside, every single one of which had a rhomboid crystal embedded into it. These crystals were emitting a faint blue light that illuminated the entire hall, and there were 2 rows of large blue chairs placed in between these pillars. Luo Qinghai sat down onto the main chair, then made an inviting hand gesture as he said, "Take a seat, fellow Taoist." Han Li duly obliged, and everyone else quickly sat down as well. Luo Qinghai introduced everyone in the hall to Han Li, then said, "This is our second meeting, yet I'm embarrassed to say that I still don't know your name. May I ask where you've come from, fellow Taoist?" "My surname is Liu. As for where I came from, that's not something for you to be concerned about. I'm not from the northern glacial immortal region, so even if I told you my place of origin, you wouldn't know of it anyway," Han Li replied in an indifferent voice. "Welcome, fellow Taoist Liu. May I ask what your intentions are?" Luo Qinghai asked with a smile. "I should be asking you that. After leaving the Black Wind Sea, I was planning to return to my sect, but I was ambushed by 2 golden immortals from your Vast Flow Palace near Wave View City. Thankfully, I was able to defeat them. Otherwise, I would already be dead by now. Were you the one who instructed them to come after me?" Han Li flipped a hand over to produce a pair of blue badges as he spoke, then slapped them forcefully down onto the tea table beside him. These were the identification badges of the 2 golden immortals that he had found within their storage tools, and all of the Vast Flow Palace cultivators' expressions instantly changed slightly upon seeing this. Luo Qinghai's pupils also contracted slightly, but he didn't say anything. A cold sneer appeared on the horned man's face, and he cast a provocative gaze toward Han Li as he said, "Surely there's been a misunderstanding. Palace Master Tai and Palace Master Q both disappeared back in Wave View City, and they most likely fell prey to enemies of our sect. We've been desperately searching for them as well, yet you proclaim that they ambushed you. I'm afraid we're all very confused." The horned man's name was Feng Hai, and he was the Southern Extreme Palace Master of the 5 Extreme Palaces. "So you're saying that I'm framing them for something that they didn't do?" Han Li asked as he turned to Feng Hai. "Do you expect us to just take your word for it? If you're going to claim that they ambushed you, then you need to provide evidence. Otherwise, we're not going to accept any culpability," Feng Hai said in a cold voice. "I came here today to demand an explanation, but seeing as you don't believe me, then I suppose there's no point in continuing this conversation any further. 2 of my juniors just so happen to be missing a pair of golden soul pills anyway," Han Li said as he rose to his feet, then turned to leave the hall. All of the vast Flow Palace cultivators' expressions changed slightly upon hearing this, and Feng Hai appeared in front of Han Li in the blink of an eye to block his path. "What do you take our vast Flow Palace for? And in that you can check and check out of as you please. You can leave if you want, but you'll have to leave the nascent souls of Palace Master Tai and Palace Master Q behind. Who do you think you are? Get out of my way." A cold look appeared on Han Li's face, and golden light flashed over his body as one of his arms abruptly swelled drastically in size as he threw a punch at Feng Hai. His arm instantly took on a radiant golden hue, looking as if it had been crafted out of pure gold, and it was also covered in countless strands of needle-like golden fur. The space in the wake of the golden fist screeched and warped violently, as if it were about to be torn apart, and even before the fist arrived, a burst of terrifying force had already descended upon Feng Hai. In response to Han Li's attack, Feng Hai took a step backward, and a layer of bright blue light surfaced over his body, while his hands transformed into a pair of formidable dragon claws. He then let loose a thunderous roar as he thrust his claws forward, and a pair of millstone-sized blue dragon claw projections appeared in front of him. Countless runes were pulsing incessantly on the pair of projections, while rippling waves of blue light were surging incessantly over their surface. The 2 dragon claw projections were layered on top of one another to oppose Han Li's fist, and a resounding boom rang out as the golden first crashed into the claw projections, upon which the latter was instantly shattered into countless specks of blue light. Not only that, but a radiant golden fist projection had erupted out of Han Li's fist, and it was crashing toward Feng Hai with unstoppable force. Feng Hai was greatly alarmed to see this, and he hurriedly swept both hands through the air, releasing a pair of small triangular blue shields. The shields transformed into a pair of translucent walls of blue light in front of him, and they had only just taken shape before they were struck by the golden fist projection. A thunderous boom rang out as the golden fist projection exploded into a burst of powerful golden shockwaves, which completely inundated the 2 walls of light. In the face of these golden shockwaves, the walls of blue light were unable to pose any resistance, instantly disintegrating under the pressure. A burst of tremendous force exploded outward in all directions, causing the entire palace to shudder violently, and Feng Hai was forced to stumble back close to 20 steps before finally managing to steady himself. All of this had taken place in the blink of an eye, and by the end of the sequence, Han Li had ended up where Feng Hai had been standing just a moment ago. The 2 triangular shields were held in his hands, and they had already been shattered into pieces. Han Li closed his hands around the ruined shields, instantly reducing them to powder that slipped through his fingers before being blown away by a gentle breath. Feng Hai's expression had darkened significantly upon seeing this, and all of the other vast flow palace golden immortals had also sprung to their feet with astonished looks on their faces. Even though Feng Hai was only at the pinnacle of the mid-golden immortal stage, he possessed a Qiulong bloodline that granted him incredible physical prowess and a body that was comparable to a profound immortal's true extreme physique. However, he had just been comprehensively beaten in a clash of strength, and it seemed like his opponent wasn't even going all out. Han Li slowly withdrew his hands, then continued onward without even bothering to spare a glance at Feng Hai. All of the vast flow palace golden immortals instantly appeared in front of Han Li to block his path, and it seemed that a battle was imminent. So this is how the vast flow palace treats its guests. This is certainly some exceptional hospitality. Han Li chuckled as bright golden light erupted out of his body, and a layer of golden fur emerged over his skin. In the blink of an eye, he transformed into a giant golden ape that was over 100 feet tall, and his aura also swelled drastically to the late golden immortal stage. Furthermore, it was an aura that was filled with an astonishing degree of malice and violence, and it was sweeping through the air in all directions. All of the vast flow palace golden immortals were very much taken aback by this abrupt elevation in Han Li's aura, and right at this moment, Luo Qinghai appeared between them and Han Li as he yelled, "Stop! Do you want to have some fun as well, Grand Palace Master Luo?" The giant golden ape asked with a cold smile, displaying no fear at all. "Please don't misunderstand, fellow Taoist Liu, I have no such intentions. All of you, go back to abodes and repent on your transgressions. None of you are to come out of seclusion without my permission. Fellow Taoist Liu is an esteemed guest of our vast flow palace, and he must be treated as such." Luo Qinghai scolded with a stern expression. The golden immortals didn't dare to raise any objections, and they flew out of the palace in quick succession. Feng Hai gave Han Li a vicious glare before also departing. In the wake of their departure, Han Li reverted back to his human form, and with that, he and Luo Qinghai were the only ones left in the palace. "I'll be honest with you, fellow Taoist Liu. Our vast flow palace suffered severe losses in the infernal frost immortal palace, and our woes were compounded even further by the unexplained disappearance of Palace Master Tai and Palace Master Q, so everyone is quite tense and on edge right now. I hope you can understand," Luo Qinghai said with a friendly smile. "Unexplained disappearance. Did I not just explain to you how they disappeared? It sounds like you also think I'm slandering them. In that case, there's no point in continuing this conversation," Han Li said with a cold smile. "Let's not rush here, fellow Taoist Liu. At our cultivation base, we're rarely ever overcome by our emotions. Everything that we do is for the sake of personal interest, so I'm assuming you didn't just come to our vast flow palace to demand an explanation. Is that correct?" Luo Qinghai asked with a faint smile. Han Li offered no response to this. Palace Master Tai and Palace Master Q's origin soul lamps haven't been snuffed out, so you must have spared them out of the kindness of your heart. Please allow me to apologize in their stead," Luo Qinghai said with a serious expression as he cupped his fist in a salute toward Han Li. "Don't misconstrue my actions, Grand Palace Master Luo. I only spared them because I didn't want to grant them a swift and painless death," Han Li said in a cold voice. "Let's be calm and civilized now, fellow Taoist Liu. I don't know why Palace Master Tai and Palace Master Q decided to go after you, but as long as you're willing to return their nascent souls to us safe and sound, our vast flow palace is willing to offer you satisfactory compensation," Luo Qinghai said. "You sound very confident that I'll agree to your proposal," Han Li remarked as he raised an eyebrow. "I'm a firm believer in the notion that everything has a price. As long as the reward is sufficiently alluring, even sworn enemies can become friends," Luo Qinghai said. Han Li was silent for a moment, then said, "In that case, I don't have much for their nascent souls anyway, so I can return them to you." Luo Qinghai was very relieved and elated to hear this, and he hurriedly cupped his fist in a grateful salute as he said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist Liu. What would you like in return? Our sect has always been rather lacking in resources compared with the likes of the Dawn Fall sect and the Blaze Dragon Dao, but I'll do my best to satisfy you. There's not much that can catch my eye in the northern glacial Immortal region, but back in the infernal frost Immortal Palace, I heard from fellow Taoist Gongshu that your vast flow palace has a cultivation art by the name of the water divination time arts, and that it's related to the laws of time. Is that correct?" Hanli asked as he sat down onto one of the chairs in the hall. "That is indeed true," Luo Qinghai confirmed as a peculiar look appeared on his face. "By the way, by fellow Taoist Gongshu, are you referring to Immortal Envoy Gongshu Jiu?" "That's right," Hanli replied with a nod. "It sounds like you also entered the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor, but I don't recall seeing you there. Could it be that you entered the Immortal Manor together with Immortal Envoy Gongshu?" Luo Qinghai asked. "I don't believe that's any of your business, Grand Palace Master Luo," Hanli said as his brows furrowed slightly. "Forgive me. Please continue, fellow Taoist Liu," Luo Qinghai said with an apologetic smile. "There's not much else to be said. Give me the water divination time arts, and I'll return the nascent souls to you," Hanli replied in a direct and concise fashion. "The water divination time arts is the premier cultivation art of our vast flow palace. Even within our sect, we can only access the cultivation art after securing majority approval from the panel of elders, so I'm afraid this may be a little too much to ask. Is there anything else I can do for you, fellow Taoist Liu?" Luo Qinghai asked. "That's the only condition that I have. It's up to you whether you want to accept it or not. I'm only going to wait 2 hours here. If I don't see the water divination time arts in 2 hours, then I'll just have to refine those nascent souls into golden soul pills," Hanli said as he casually flipped a hand over to produce an object. Hanli had summoned a white crystal ball, sealed within which was a blue nascent soul in the appearance of the fair-skinned scholar, and Luo Qinghai's pupils instantly contracted slightly upon seeing this. The nascent soul was ecstatic to see Luo Qinghai, but it was completely immobilized, and it wasn't able to communicate with Luo Qinghai through voice transmission either. Luo Qinghai shifted his gaze from the white crystal ball to Hanli, then said, "Please wait here for a moment, fellow Taoist Liu. I have to discuss this matter with the others." After that, Luo Qinghai promptly departed, leaving Hanli on his own in the hall. "Ali." Luo Qinghai emerged from the hall, with his brows tightly furrowed in indecision. After a brief pause, he quickly made his way into a side hall, where all of the other golden immortals were already waiting for him, and they immediately rose to their feet as he entered the room. "How did it go, Grand Palace Master?" the green-faced elderly man asked. Luo Qinghai gave everyone a brief recount of his conversation with Hanli. "He wants the water divination time arts. He must be delusional," Feng Hai harumphed coldly. "The water divination time arts is the most prized treasure of our vast flow palace. How can we give it to an outsider?" the blue-robed woman chimed in. "The problem is that this is the only condition that he stated. If we turn him down, what's going to happen to Palace Master Tai and Palace Master Qiu?" the green-faced elderly man asked with tightly furrowed brows. The blue-robed woman fell silent upon hearing this. "He may be a formidable opponent, but if all of us attack him at once with the restrictions in the vast flow palace on our side, surely we'll be able to bring him down. Once he's dead, we'll be able to save Palace Master Tai and Palace Master Qiu's nascent souls," Feng Hai suggested as a hint of killing intent flashed through his eyes. Everyone else was also quite tempted by this proposal. That man has a very peculiar aura, and I've never seen such fierce, baleful qi in anyone, so he's definitely no ordinary golden immortal. On top of that, I can sense that there's some type of extremely formidable power that he still hasn't displayed yet. Additionally, he seems to be an acquaintance of Gongshu Jiu's, so he may be a very important figure in the heavenly court. Regardless of whether we can take him down or not, attempting to do so will result in severe trouble for our sect, so that's an option that we cannot explore, Luo Qinghai replied with a shake of his head. How are you so sure of that, Grand Palace Master? Feng Hai asked. Back when the Immortal Manor first opened, only 7 infernal frost scenic paintings appeared, and I saw all of the cultivators in possession of those 7 paintings, but none of them possessed the same appearance or aura as that man. Hence, he must have entered the Immortal Manor together with Gongshu Jiu, using the 8th infernal frost scenic painting, which indicates that they had to have been quite close with one another, Luo Qinghai replied. Everyone nodded in response upon hearing this. What do we do then? Are we really just going to hand the water divination time arts over to him? Feng Hai asked in an indignant manner. The other golden immortals all fell silent upon hearing this. You've always been the best decision-maker out of all of us, Grand Palace Master, so I think you should decide on how we should proceed, the green-faced elderly man said. I'm not exaggerating when I say that this has been the most tumultuous period in the northern glacial Immortal Palace in the past hundreds of thousands of years. The northern glacial Immortal Palace, the Dawn Fall sect, and the Blaze Dragon Dao have all fallen from their pedestals, while only our vast Flow Palace remains relatively intact. In times of crisis, countless opportunities present themselves, and this is the ideal time for our vast Flow Palace to expand its forces. If we can take full advantage of this opportunity, it's very much possible for us to crush the Dawn Fall sect and the Blaze Dragon Dao to become the #1 sect in the northern glacial Immortal Palace, Luo Qinghai said. Excited looks appeared on everyone's faces upon hearing this. Even though the vast Flow Palace was one of the top 3 sects of the northern glacial Immortal region, it had always been inferior to the Dawn Fall sect and the Blaze Dragon Dao. If they could surpass those 2 sects, not only would they be able to reap tremendous benefits, just the honor to be gained was already extremely appealing to them. What do you suggest we do, Grand Palace Master? Feng Hai asked. If we want to achieve that objective, then Palace Master Tai and Palace Master Qiu are indispensable to us. Hence, I think we should recover their nascent souls in exchange for the water divination time arts, Luo Qinghai said. I agree. Ensuring the bright future of our vast Flow Palace is far more important than the water divination time arts, the green-faced elderly man declared. Indeed. On top of that, the cultivation art is extremely profound and difficult to understand. Throughout the entire history of our vast Flow Palace, barely anyone has been able to make any progress in this cultivation art, and even the exceptional prodigies who managed to make some inroads progressed far too slowly and were quickly outstripped by their peers who were cultivating other law powers, so it really is just a waste of time. I also agree. The cultivation art is a small price to pay in exchange for 2 golden immortal stage elders. Everyone else quickly nodded in agreement as well. Feng Hai was still a little reluctant, but seeing as everyone else had already expressed the approval of the proposal, he didn't raise any further objections. In that case, please go fetch the water divination time arts, Elder Kunig Fu, Luo Qinghai said to the green-faced elderly man, who promptly departed from the hall. Ali. Han Li was sitting on his own while playing with the white crystal ball in his hand when the sound of footsteps rang out from outside, and Luo Qinghai and the green-faced elderly man entered the room. How did your discussion go, Grand Palace Master Luo? Han Li asked. Sorry to keep you waiting, fellow Taoist Liu. This is the water divination time arts, Luo Qinghai said as he flipped a hand over to produce a blue jade slip before placing it onto the tea table beside Han Li. "You're a smart man, Grand Palace Master Luo," Han Li said as he also flipped a hand over to produce another white crystal ball, this one containing the elderly man's nascent soul. He tossed both of the crystal balls to Luo Qinghai, then reached out to grab the blue jade slip. Luo Qinghai caught the pair of crystal balls, then injected a burst of blue light into each of them, upon which an elated look appeared on his face. The two nascent souls inside had only been restricted but not harmed, so they could possess new bodies just fine. Meanwhile, Han Li injected his spiritual sense into the jade slip for a moment, then quickly withdrew his spiritual sense as a surprised look appeared on his face. Luo Qinghai had already stowed the pair of crystal balls away, and upon noticing Han Li's expression, he asked, "Is there something wrong?" "No, now that the exchange is done, I'll be taking my leave," Han Li replied as he stowed the jade slip away, then turned to depart. An urgent look appeared in Luo Qinghai's face upon hearing this, and he hurriedly said, "There's no hurry to leave, fellow Taoist Liu. Why don't you stay at our vast flow palace for a few days so I can show you some hospitality?" "There's no need for that. I don't know anything about fellow Taoist Gongshu or what happened in the infernal frost immortal manor, so there's no need to waste your time on me, Grand Palace Master Luo," Han Li said. Luo Qinghai's expression stiffened slightly upon hearing this, but it then quickly returned to normal as he turned to the green-faced elderly man as he said, "In that case, I won't keep you any longer. Elder Qing Fu, please escort fellow Taoist Liu out of the sect for me." "Yes, Grand Palace Master. Please come with me, fellow Taoist Liu," the green-faced elderly man replied, then led Han Li out of the hall before flying away into the distance. Luo Qinghai watched as the two of them departed, and he remained standing at the entrance of the hall for a moment before also departing himself. Close to a day later, a streak of azure light flew out of the ancient Point Mountain range, then descended onto a small hill to reveal Han Li. He turned back to the ancient Point Mountain range, and a faint smile appeared on his face. At the same time, Jin Tong emerged beside him amid a flash of golden light. "It's a good thing you were with me, Jin Tong. Otherwise, that wouldn't have gone so smoothly," Han Li said. Back in the vast Flow Palace, he had completely concealed his own aura while adopting his giant mountain ape form, while Jin Tong had released her late golden immortal stage aura, thereby resulting in the illusion that Han Li possessed her aura, ultimately intimidating Luo Qinghai into complying to his demands. "I can't believe you gave those nascent souls to them instead of feeding them to me," Jin Tong said with a displeased expression. Han Li smiled as he flipped a hand over to summon another pair of golden immortal stage nascent souls, and the displeasure on Jin Tong's face was instantly replaced with elation as he grabbed the pair of nascent souls from him. These two nascent souls had been a part of a Gongshu Jiu's collection, of which there were 5 or 6 left. Perhaps he had secured these nascent souls from the infernal frost immortal manor, or perhaps he had sourced them from elsewhere. Han Li pulled out the jade slip that contained the water divination time arts, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Even though he was still yet to completely grasp the illusory dawn-treasured scripture that he had obtained from the Dawn Fall sect, it had reminded him of the vast Flow Palace's water divination time arts. He was going to be leaving the northern glacial immortal region anyway, so he may as well claim all 3 of the immortal region's time attribute cultivation arts, hence his decision to visit the vast Flow Palace. At first glance, the water divination time arts was different from both the mantra axis scripture and the illusory dawn-treasured scripture, in that it was a cultivation art that manifested time law powers using the power of water. However, what was quite surprising to Han Li was that all 3 of them had certain similarities. Could it be that the three time attribute cultivation arts of the northern glacial immortal region are somehow connected with one another? Han Li only considered this notion briefly before shaking his head and stowing the jade slip away again. His top priority at the moment was to leave the northern glacial immortal region as soon as possible, so he would just have to study the cultivation art another time. With a sweep of his sleeve, the green jade flying carriage appeared, and he released a burst of azure light to sweep up Jin Tong before flying onto the carriage. Immediately thereafter, the carriage shot forth toward the entrance to the primordial land as a ball of green light. Ali, in a certain space countless kilometers away from the northern glacial immortal region. The sky here was a radiant blue color with giant white clouds drifting lazily through the air, while a series of spirit birds flew through them. Everything here seemed to be particularly bright, as if there weren't any darkness or shadows here. Above the white immortal clouds was a vast world that consisted of countless giant mountains hovering in the sky, stretching as far as the eyes could see. These mountains all varied in size, with some only tens of thousands of feet tall, while the largest one stood at a staggering tens of millions of feet in size. Each mountain carried one or multiple majestic buildings, and these buildings were all of different styles. But they shared one similarity, which was that they were all radiating dazzling golden light. The mountains were connected by bridges of rainbow light, presenting a spectacular sight to behold. There was one mountain that was several million feet tall, hovering in midair, and it was riddled with radiant golden spirit patterns. Around a dozen smaller mountains were hovering around it, much like stars around a moon. On the summit of the mountain stood a golden palace that was glowing radiantly like everything else here. The palace was around 1,000 feet tall and constructed from some type of unknown golden jade material, and it was extremely opulent and spectacular. Above the entrance of the palace hung a silver plaque that read Dawn Void Palace. There were also many buildings littered across the smaller mountains around the giant golden peak, some of which were medicine gardens, while others were pill refinement chambers. The nearest one of the smaller mountains had a large estate on its summit, within which numerous immortals were being kept, and it was looked after by several young servants. Right at this moment, a streak of white light shot forth from afar, then flashed over the estate before hurtling toward the summit of the giant golden mountain. The streak of white light was releasing a burst of tremendous spiritual pressure, and a giant azure light barrier quickly surfaced around the estate to keep the immense spiritual pressure at bay, but some of it was still able to force its way through. All of the immortal beasts in the estate immediately became anxious and restless, while all of the servants' complexions paled significantly as they collapsed to the ground. Only after the spiritual pressure had completely faded did they return unsteadily to their feet, with looks of admiration and longing on their faces. Who was that? Their aura was incredible. A tall and thin young man asked as he cast his gaze toward the summit of the giant golden peak with an excited expression. You were only just assigned to the Dawn Void Palace, so it's no surprise that you don't know of him. That was Su Yunping, the fifth disciple of the Dawn Void Immortal Lord, one of the older servants replied. Master Su seems to become more powerful every time I see him. Another servant with a pair of bushy eyebrows mused. I heard that Master Su has been cultivating in seclusion for a long time, attempting to break through the mid-high zenith stage bottleneck. Now that he's come out of seclusion, I presume he's already made the breakthrough. However, he doesn't seem to have consolidated his cultivation base yet. Otherwise, there would be no spillage of spiritual pressure, the older servant said. I heard that Master Su has only been a disciple of the Dawn Void Immortal Lord, yet he's already reached the mid-high zenith stage. If we had even 1/100th of his aptitude, we wouldn't be stuck here, the servant with the bushy eyebrows sighed. Master Su ascended from a lower realm, so it's no surprise that he possesses exceptional aptitude. Even among the Dawn Void Immortal Lord's disciples, he ranks near the top in terms of aptitude, so he's certainly far beyond us. The older servant sighed with a self-deprecating expression. After that, they began busying themselves with their respective duties again. Meanwhile, the streak of white light descended in front of the palace on the summit of the giant golden mountain, then faded to reveal a golden-robed young man. He possessed a pair of handsome features, most notably of which were a pair of bright eyes and sharp brows, and there was an aura of sharpness about him. On either side of the palace stood a guard clad in golden armor, and the skin on their faces was giving off a metallic sheen. "Is my master inside?" the golden-robed young man asked. "He is," one of the armored guards replied. The golden-robed young man nodded in response, then made his way into the palace and passed through a few corridors to appear in a side hall. The hall was completely empty with the exception of a silver-raised platform, upon which stood a golden chair. A purple-robed middle-aged man was seated on the chair with his legs crossed. He had a dark complexion, and there was a powerful air of authority about him. At this moment, his eyes were tightly shut, and bursts of purple light were emanating from his body, which was enshrouded within a cloud of faint purple mist. The entire hall was also enveloped within a burst of strange power, and as the man breathed, the purple mist pulsed rhythmically, while the space within the hall trembled and buzzed, as if everything in the hall were in his control. A hesitant look appeared on the golden-robed young man's face, but he still gritted his teeth to muster up his courage as he declared, "Disciple Su Yunping pays his respects to his master." The purple-robed man's eyelids fluttered slightly before springing open, and he cast a bright and piercing gaze toward the golden-robed young man, who shuddered involuntarily as his complexion paled slightly. The bright gleam in the purple-robed man's eyes quickly faded, and his aura also became restrained as he asked, "Is there something you need from me, Yunping?" "Master, I just received news from the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, informing me that Palace Master Xiao Jinhen had ventured into the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor, but they suffered extremely severe losses, with Xiao Jinhen and several golden immortal stage elders perishing in the Immortal Manor," Su Yunping reported. The purple-robed man's expression remained completely unchanged as he asked, "Oh, if I recall correctly, Xiao Jinhen was at the pinnacle of the golden immortal stage. How did he die?" After receiving this news, I immediately sent out people to investigate, but only a small handful of the Immortal Palace's cultivators managed to return from the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor alive, and none of them knew exactly what had happened. However, Xiao Jinhen had been attempting to unite the Northern Glacial Immortal region for a long time, and as a result, a lot of tension had arisen between him and the other major powers of the Immortal region, so I presume his demise must have had something to do with them, Su Yunping replied. "I've heard about what Xiao Jinhen had been doing recently. While it's true that he was a little too aggressive, he was still a representative of our heavenly court, and his death cannot be tolerated. Send someone to the Northern Glacial Immortal region to investigate this matter right away. Find all of the people who contributed to his demise and have them all killed. The authority of the heavenly court is not to be challenged," the purple-robed man declared as a cold look appeared in his eyes. "I've already sent people to the Northern Glacial Immortal region to investigate this matter, and I'm sure an outcome will arise soon," Su Yunping replied. "Good, make sure to get to the bottom of this," the purple-robed man said. "I'll do my best, Master. Also, I have something else to report to you," Su Yunping said. "What is it?" the purple-robed man asked. "I heard that Immortal Envoy Ganchu of the Immortal Prison also entered the infernal frost immortal manor to pursue some members of the reincarnation palace, but he also seemed to have met his demise in there, Su Yunping said. Gongshu, are you referring to Gongshu Jiu from the Gongshu clan? The purple-robed man asked as he raised an eyebrow. That's right, Su Yunping replied. Gongshu Jiu wasn't particularly powerful among immortal envoys, but he was still a high zenith stage jade immortal, so there shouldn't have been anyone in the northern glacial immortal region capable of killing him. Is the reincarnation palace behind this? The purple-robed man asked as he rose to his feet. At this point, those details are still unclear, but we would have surely found out had the reincarnation palace sent a high zenith cultivators into the northern glacial immortal region. Should I send out some people to investigate this matter as well? Su Yunping asked. There's no need for that. The immortal prison has always acted as an independent entity, so they'll be sure to send someone to investigate this matter, and there's no need for us to get involved, the purple-robed man said. Yes, master, Su Yunping replied. You did very well in taking care of this matter. The northern glacial immortal region is under my jurisdiction, so it must not be allowed to descend into chaos. Go and arrange for a new palace master to be selected as soon as possible, the purple-robed man said. Su Yunping promptly departed after extending a parting salute, while the purple-robed man paced slowly back and forth in the hall with a contemplative look on his face. Moments later, he suddenly stopped in his tracks, then vanished from the hall amid a flash of purple light. Ali. Across the sea to the southwest of the Upper R continent was an even larger continent called the Primordial Edge continent. The eastern region of the continent was riddled with countless mountains, littered throughout which were innumerable dense forests and other perilous terrains, with very cities present. Close to 100,000 kilometers inland from the east coast was a cliff that was over 10,000 feet tall and stretched for millions of kilometers, acting as a natural wall that sprawled over the continent from its north to its south. It was still the same continent, yet it was as if the land had been sliced into two here. Above the cliff was a vast oasis, yet below it was a boundless desert. Atop the cliff was a city that stretched for tens of thousands of kilometers like a resting black dragon, and there were passes that were filled with restrictions and beacon towers positioned strategically along the city. Even with all these passes and beacon towers, there was only one city on the border, and it was called Primordial Origin City. Close to nightfall, the sun in the sky had already set below the city wall, but its warm radiance could still be seen extending over the horizon, basking the cold, black city walls in a layer of gentle warmth. In the vast desert at the foot of the cliff to the west of the city, the sand was glowing gold under the light of dusk, and aside from the sound of the gentle breeze blowing through the area, there were no other sounds to be heard. In stark contrast, on the other side of the city wall stood a massive city that was hundreds of kilometers in size. The city was filled with streets and alleys, as well as buildings of different description, and even though it still wasn't nighttime yet, the city was already brightly lit. Due to how enormous the city was, aside from the central region of the city, which was relatively well planned out and organized, the rest of the city sprawled out toward the east in a completely disorganized and haphazard fashion. At this moment, there were two figures, one tall and one short, slowly walking alongside one another on the ancient path leading toward the outskirts of the city. The shorter of the two figures was a little girl who appeared to be 8 or 9 years old, wearing a festive little red coat with embroidered golden edges. She was holding 3 tankulas as she walked beside a tall man dressed in an azure robe. The man was none other than Han Li, while the little girl was Jin Tong. The first stop on the map that Worm 3 had given him was the same location that Taoist Huyan pointed out to him, and after arriving in Primordial Origin City, Han Li decided to gather more information before he made a decision on how he was embark on this journey through the primordial land. "Why do I have to conceal my cultivation base, uncle?" Jin Tong asked with a puzzled expression while munching on a tanghulu. "Your late golden, immortal stage aura will attract too much attention here," Han Li replied as he cast his gaze toward the edge of the city. "Isn't that what we want? It would be great if we could lure a few golden immortals into attacking us, and after we kill them all, I'll have more snacks to eat. I've constantly been feeling hungry recently," Jin Tong said in an excited manner. "Our top priority right now is to leave the northern glacial immortal region, so you're not allowed to cause any trouble. Otherwise, I'll wear you on my finger as a ring instead of allowing you to follow me in your human form," Han Li warned with a serious expression. "Don't do that. Fine, fine, I'll behave," Jin Tong sighed in a reluctant voice. As the two of them were speaking, they had already arrived in the outer city of Primordial Origin City. The streets in the outer city were lined with mud and short brick and tile buildings, most of which had rectangular tables in front of them, upon which were placed all types of merchandise. The majority of the merchandise catered toward mortals, so they were of no interest to Han Li. As they approached the inner city, the streets became wider and much more uniform, and the buildings that lined the streets also became taller and more extravagant. However, in contrast with the other continents in the northern glacial immortal region, there was a clear disparity in the style in which the buildings were constructed. There were very few cylindrical pillars incorporated into the buildings here, nor any intricate engravings that were commonplace elsewhere. Overall, the style was simpler and rougher around the edges, and was lacking in intricacy and thoughtfulness. Furthermore, the wares being sold on the sides of the streets further accentuated the fact that this continent was different from the others. Even though it was getting dark, there were still quite a few people out on the streets, and after some observation, Han Li discovered that there were many foreign beings here that weren't commonly seen elsewhere in the northern glacial immortal region. After walking for only a few hundred meters, Han Li had already spotted a decent number of foreign beings with peculiar appearances and strange attire. However, this was no surprise, considering that this continent was situated on the border of the northern glacial immortal region. "Something smells really good, uncle," Jin Tong exclaimed as soon as she finished the tanghulu in her hand, following which she immediately rushed over to a street-side stall. Standing behind the stall was a dark-skinned man with a well-built physique, and he smiled as he asked, "How can I help you, little girl?" Han Li followed Jin Tong to the stall to find that there was a huge copper pot full of bubbling oil placed beside it. Beside the pot was a table that was laden with freshly deep-fried food that was rather unappealing in appearance, but were giving off an alluring aroma. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly at the sight of the food being sold. There were appendages of roughly the same thickness as human arms, giant pincers the size of tables, and an eyeball from some type of unidentifiable beast, all of which had been fried to a golden color and a crispy texture. "You want to eat this stuff?" Han Li asked. "I do. I'll take all of it," Jin Tong declared as she swept a hand through the air, and all of the food on the table was instantly stowed away into her storage bracelet. A resigned smile appeared on Han Li's face as he paid the stall owner, who was ecstatic to have sold so much food at once. As Han Li and Jin Tong continued to approach the inner city, the streets were becoming more and more packed with pedestrians. There were many street-side stall owners loudly advertising their wares, and many verbal arguments could also be heard, with no shortage of derogatory terms being thrown around. There were also quite a few places where there were scantily dressed women leaning against the railing or standing at the entrance, waving their fans and their sleeves to attract patrons to their doors. Most of the people in the city were mortals, and there were quite a few cultivators as well, but the majority of them possessed very lowly cultivation bases. Han Li was listening to the conversations taking place around him, trying to gather some useful information. However, that ultimately proved to be futile, so he grabbed onto Jin Tong's arm and rose up into the air to fly directly toward the inner city. As they flew through the sky, Han Li suddenly raised an eyebrow at the sight of the countless specks of light down below, and he murmured to himself, "It seems like this entire city is a complex formation. The larger the city is, the more stable the formation. No wonder there are no city walls constructed here. How brilliant!" "What's so brilliant, uncle?" Jin Tong asked while crunching on a giant fried pincer. An amused smile appeared on Han Li's face as he chuckled. "Don't worry about it, just focus on your food." In contrast with the outer city, the buildings in the inner city were far more intricately constructed, and many decorative engravings could be seen on these buildings. But they were all depicting strange beasts that Han Li had never seen before. The shops and restaurants that lined the streets had also turned into three-story pavilions, littered in between which were some large inns. What was most intriguing to Han Li was that there was a giant hemispherical building every few streets, and these were always the liveliest and most bustling places on their respective streets. Each of these buildings had 4 entrances, and the walls were riddled with fortification runes. Every once in a while, the sound of raucous cheering would ring out within these buildings. "It sounds really fun in there, uncle. Let's go in and take a look," Jin Tong suggested with an intrigued expression. "Those are just arenas where different beasts are pitted against each other, while bets are placed by the spectators," Han Li explained with a shake of his head. Jin Tong immediately lost interest upon hearing this. "We've been traveling non-stop recently, so let's take a rest in this city for tonight, then leave the city tomorrow to travel to the Primordial land," Han Li said as he took a glance up at the starry night sky. "You can do whatever you want, uncle. I'm feeling a little drowsy after my meal, so I'm going to sleep for a bit," Jin Tong replied, then shrank down into a tiny golden beetle before landing on Han Li's finger as a golden ring. Han Li could only shake his head with a resigned smile as he made his way toward the center of the city. As he did so, he discovered that the buildings on the streets were becoming sparser. This wasn't because the city wasn't sufficiently prosperous. Instead, it was because all of the buildings in the core area of the inner city had been constructed in accordance with that giant formation. Hence, they couldn't be altered on a whim, and piling too many buildings into the area would compromise the formation. As Han Li made his way to the entrance of a street, he spotted a tall red archway. The pillars of the archway had intricate designs of dragons and phoenixes engraved upon them, and the words "Faint Smoke Garden" were inscribed on a plaque at the center of the archway. Han Li peered into the archway with his bright-sight spirit eyes to find that the world's origin chi in the area beyond, it was far more abundant than in other areas, and he began to make his way toward the archway. Only as he approached the archway did he notice that there was a black wooden plaque nearby, upon which were inscribed the words, "Only cultivators at or above the deity transformation stage allowed." Han Li stepped through the archway, and he was immediately welcomed by a tall and slender female cultivator in a palace dress. "Welcome, esteemed guest," the woman greeted as she extended a respectful curtsy. Her etiquette and mannerisms were completely impeccable, but her smile was a little too uniform and professional, making her slightly cold and uninviting. "Do you have any spare rooms?" Han Li asked. "There's a vacant room in a peaceful location in the B-grade garden," the woman replied. "There are different grades in the rooms here. Do you have any vacant rooms in your A-grade garden?" Han Li asked. "This must be your first time in Primordial Origin City, right? There's an unofficial rule in all of the Immortal inns in the city, which is that all rooms are split into 4 grades, A, B, C, and D, and grade rooms are only accessible to cultivators at or above the true Immortal stage. Given your Grand Ascension stage cultivation base, a B-grade room is most suitable for you, the woman explained with an apologetic expression. I see, that's fine, please lead the way, Han Li replied with a smile. He was only planning to stay here for one night anyway, so it didn't really matter whether he stayed in an A-grade room or a B-grade one. The woman hesitated momentarily, then asked, "You're not going to ask about the price? Arrange for some food and wine to be sent to my room. I'll pay for everything when I leave tomorrow," Han Li replied in an indifferent voice. "As you wish, please come with me," the woman replied with another curtsy. She then led Han Li out of the rear hall and along a winding corridor toward the backyard. "If this is your first time here, why don't you spend a few more days in Primordial Origin City?" the woman suggested as she led the way. "There are some places that are worth visiting in the city, and it would be a pity not to pay them a visit." "What are some of these places?" Han Li asked in a casual manner. The exact time when Primordial Origin City was first constructed is unknown. Throughout its history, the city has been destroyed on many occasions during battles between cultivators and primordial beasts, and the current iteration of the city was reconstructed with the support of all of the northern glacial immortal region's top sects after the most recent war, the woman introduced. "Does that mean primordial beasts have managed to attack their way into the city before?" Han Li asked. "That's right. The last large-scale war was a very long time ago, so there aren't many people around who still remember it, but I've heard that the primordial beasts were able to force their way into the city under the leadership of some primordial true spirits," the woman replied with a nod. "Is the city jointly overseen by all of the major sects?" Han Li asked. "That's not the case. Due to the special location of the city, it's currently being overseen by the city lord's manor, and the major sects play no part in its management. However, the city is on good terms with all of the major sects, so it'll generally receive reinforcements from those sects in its times of need," the woman explained. "What about the Immortal Palace? Do they play no role in overseeing the city?" Han Li asked. "The Northern Glacial Immortal Palace has expressed intentions of taking over the city in the past, but they've been opposed by all of the major sects, and the city lord of Primordial Origin City is a cultivator at the pinnacle of the Golden Immortal stage, so the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace has been unable to usurp the city lord's manor. However," the woman's voice trailed off here as a hesitant look appeared on her face. Han Li could already guess what she wanted to say, but he still asked, "What is it?" "In the wake of the Blaze Dragon Dao incident, the state of the Northern Glacial Immortal region will most likely undergo a change, and Primordial Origin City may be affected as well," the woman said with a concerned expression. Han Li was rather relieved to hear this. It seemed like word of what had happened in the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor still hadn't spread across the Northern Glacial Immortal region yet. At the very least, it appeared that those in Primordial Origin City were still oblivious to such matters. Indeed, there seems to be some unrest brewing in the Northern Glacial Immortal region of late, Han Li remarked. "May I ask for what purpose you're visiting Primordial Origin City, esteemed guest?" the woman asked. "Truth be told, I'm planning to travel to the Primordial Land tomorrow," Han Li replied in a candid fashion. "You're going to leave the city?" the woman asked as she stopped in her tracks with a surprised look on her face. "Are you traveling with someone else?" "No, I prefer to travel alone," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "Please pardon me for sticking my nose into your business, but with your cultivation base, leaving the city alone will be no different from throwing yourself to the wolves," the woman said as she extended an apologetic bow. "Why is that? Is there some source of significant peril outside the city?" Han Li asked. "Outside Primordial Origin City is an extremely vast sea of sand that's filled with countless natural sand traps that are incredibly deep. Not only will it be impossible for a cultivator to traverse through the unforgiving terrain, even beasts from other deserts are unable to survive there. Only by traveling on one of the large ships in the city will you be able to reach the other side of the sea of sand, the woman explained. Why can't a cultivator just fly over the sea of sand then? Are there some perils present in the sky as well? Hanley asked. Even a golden, immortal cultivator most likely wouldn't dare to traverse through the sea of sand on an aerial route. Primordial Origin City is very close to the primordial land, and there were often powerful primordial beings roaming through the sea of sand. Even many late true immortal cultivators have met terrible fates upon running into some of these primordial beasts, the woman explained. Hanley could tell from the tone of her voice that she wasn't merely trying to scare him, and his brows furrowed slightly in contemplation. Aside from that, even if one is lucky enough to avoid all of those ferocious beasts, there are many mirages and illusions in the sea of sand that could easily lead one astray. If luck is on one's side, perhaps they'll be able to stumble their way back to Primordial Origin City in a few centuries. But if luck isn't smiling upon them then. The woman's voice trailed off there, but the implications were already very apparent. Where can I go to board one of these ships? Hanley asked after some contemplation. The ship dock is located near the beacon tower on the western city gate. These ships only make 2 trips a year, but you're in luck as the next ship will be departing in just half a month, the woman replied. If cultivators are susceptible to being attacked upon entering the sea of sand, wouldn't a ship full of cultivators be even more prone to attracting primordial beasts? Hanley asked with a puzzled expression. Rest assured, esteemed guest. These ships were crafted by the city lord's manor, and I've heard that there are certain mechanisms in the ship that completely conceal its aura to avoid the detection of primordial beings, the woman explained. So you're saying that the ship is guaranteed to be able to reach the other side of the sea of sand? Hanley asked as he raised an eyebrow. Nothing is truly guaranteed in life, esteemed guest. As recently as 8 years ago, one of the ships was struck down by a primordial true spirit, and there were barely any survivors, the woman replied with a wry smile. If it can conceal its own aura, then how was it struck down? Hanley asked with a surprised expression. The two of them arrived in the backyard as they were speaking. From what I heard, a true immortal stage primordial hunter on the ship had slain a nest of juvenile nine-eyed centipedes on a hunting trip, infuriating the true immortal stage parent of the centipedes, which had been away from the nest at the time. It was able to catch a whiff of the cultivator's bloodline aura from the blood that he had shed at the nest, and that was what ultimately resulted in that tragedy, the woman explained. By primordial hunter, you're referring to cultivators who enter the primordial land to hunt for primordial beasts, right? Hanley asked. Yes, but also no. Hunting primordial beasts is indeed one of the objectives of primordial hunters, but on top of that, they're also searching for strange and exotic plants, as well as ore, gemstones, and other resources from the primordial land, the woman replied. I'm sure there must have been countless primordial hunters over the years. Have any of them ever been able to piece together a map of the primordial land? Hanley asked. I'm afraid not. If you're going to visit any of the shops in the city, make sure to be on your guard as all of the merchants claiming to have maps of the primordial land for sale are frauds, the woman replied with a shake of her head. Why is that? Hanley asked. While it's true that countless cultivators have ventured into the primordial land over the years, they've only been able to explore a very limited area. The only people who have dared to venture deep into the primordial land and returned alive were almighty beings at or above the golden immortal stage, and it's said that only cultivators at or above the high zenith stage have been able to pass through the primordial land to the neighboring Black Mountain immortal region. Cultivators of this caliber are extremely rare, and none of them would be willing to map out the primordial land as a public service for others, the woman explained. That does make sense, Han Li mused with a slight nod. You must have come to Primordial Origin City as you're also interested in becoming a primordial hunter, right? I advise you to limit your activities to the already charted areas of the primordial land. There will be no lack of bounties waiting for you even in those explored areas, the woman suggested. Before long, the two of them had already arrived in front of a courtyard in the B-grade garden. Han Li swept his gaze over the courtyard to find that it had been arranged in a triangular formation, with a main room at the center, on either side of which was a side room, and in the middle was a small garden filled with vibrant flowers and young immortal plants. The woman pulled out an azure jade badge that was engraved with the words "Rain Hearing Courtyard," then swept it through the air. The restriction that encompassed the entire courtyard instantly split open, following which a gentle, fragrant breeze blew out from within, and a pair of maidservants emerged before extending a collective curtsy toward Han Li. Both of these maidservants are core formation cultivators with their virginity still intact. If you take a liking to them, then that would be a great honor for them. Otherwise, you can just have them perform some servant duties for you, the woman said as he offered the jade badge to Han Li with both hands. I don't require any servants. I'm used to being on my own, Han Li said as he accepted the jade badge. The two maidservants weren't inferior to the woman who had guided Han Li here in the looks department, and a hint of disappointment flashed through their eyes upon hearing this, but neither of them dared to say anything. In that case, I'll have them leave you in peace. Please rest for a moment. The wine and food that you ordered will be here shortly, the woman replied. You have my thanks, Han Li said as he tossed a brocade pouch toward the woman. The woman caught the cloth pouch, then inspected its contents momentarily with her hand concealed up her sleeve, and a combination of shock and elation appeared on her face as she exclaimed, I am in awe of your generosity, esteemed guest. How about I take you to an A-grade courtyard instead? There's no need for that, this courtyard is just fine. You can all go now, Han Li said with a dismissive wave of his hand, then made his way into the courtyard. A faint smile appeared on the woman's face as she looked on at Han Li's departing figure, and she pulled a top-grade spirit stone out of the brocade pouch for closer inspection. Ali. The next day, Han Li departed from the faint smoke garden early in the morning. Having slept an entire night, Jin Tong was completely reinvigorated, and at this point, she had already picked up a wide formation of different foods from the street-side stalls. Are we leaving now, uncle? Jin Tong asked with a reluctant expression. There's no hurry to leave, Han Li replied in an ambiguous fashion, then made his way toward the western city gate, quickly arriving at the dock there. What are we doing here, uncle? Jin Tong asked. Wait here for me for a bit, Han Li said to Jin Tong, then made his way into a nearby black building. A short while later, he emerged from the building with a black talisman in his hand, upon which was engraved a design of a large ship. What's this? Jin Tong asked with a curious expression as she grabbed the spirit talisman from Han Li. It's a ship ticket, Han Li replied, then briefly explained to Jin Tong why they were going to travel by ship. With our powers, there's no need to travel by ship. It would be much faster if we just flew straight through the sea of sand, Jin Tong said as she pursed her lips in displeasure. This is going to be our first foray into the primordial land, so it's better to be a bit more cautious. On top of that, seeing as there's a ship that can cross this sea of sand, why wouldn't we take advantage of it? Han Li said with a smile. Jin Tong thought about this for a moment, then shrugged her little shoulders before continuing to enjoy her feast. After stowing the ship ticket away, Han Li made his way toward the bustling streets in the city. Even though he had a very large collection of pills and resources, most of them had been taken from the storage tools of Gong Shujiu and the others, so they may not necessarily be useful to him. Hence, he had to prepare some things in preparation for the upcoming journey. Given this city's close proximity to the primordial land, there had to be many resources unique to the primordial land being sold in the city, so it was definitely worth exploring. However, Primordial Origin City was massive, and many places were enshrouded in restrictions that could keep out spiritual sense. It was going to take far too long to just explore the city blindly, so Han Li made his way into a nearby variety store, where he purchased a book that introduced the city to newcomers. After reading through the book, he developed a rough grasp of the city's layout. He stowed the book away, then continued onward, and it wasn't long before he arrived in a prosperous area in the inner city. In contrast with other parts of the city, this place was a giant white jade plaza. There were close to 100 wide streets branching out in all directions, with the plaza acting as the central point. And hovering in the air above the plaza was a white palace that looked as if it had been entirely constructed out of pristine white jade. There were countless large white runes swirling around the palace, releasing bursts of white light that enshrouded the entire plaza and all of the streets around it. This was the largest business area in Primordial Origin City, and it was certainly living up to its reputation. Han Li stood at the entrance of the street, looking up at the white palace in the sky with a thoughtful expression. According to the book that he had read, the palace had been created by the city lord of Primordial Origin City, and those inside it could oversee everything that happened along the entire street. Due to the fact that Primordial Origin City was situated on the border of the Immortal region, it had a reputation for being somewhat chaotic, but this street was always a very peaceful place. The reason for this was that battles were strictly prohibited here, and anyone who went against this rule would be severely punished, even killed on the spot in some cases. Over time, this floating palace became a symbol of power and a beacon of authority in the eyes of Primordial Origin City's cultivators. Han Li quickly withdrew his gaze, then began to inspect the street around him. Even though there were many streets branching off from the plaza, it didn't appear messy or cluttered in the slightest. Instead, everything had been arranged in an orderly fashion, and it was clear that the layout of the streets had been set out by experts in the field. Furthermore, all of the shops on each street specialized in only selling one type of merchandise, whether that be materials or spirit treasures or pills. After observing his surroundings for a moment, Han Li made his way down one of the wider streets. All types of spirit plants were being sold in the shops on this street, and it was quite a lively and bustling street. He began making his way toward one of the larger shops on the street, yet right as he was about to step into it, he suddenly stopped in his tracks, then turned around to look behind him with furrowed brows. As it turned out, Jin Tong had suddenly vanished. Han Li released his spiritual sense to search for Jin Tong, and as it turned out, she had rushed over to the nearby food stalls again. Han Li shook his head in exasperation, but didn't summon Jin Tong back to his side. Even though her powers still didn't quite place her at the very top of the northern glacial Immortal region, he was confident that there was no one in Primordial Origin City capable of harming her. With that in mind, he made his way into the shop, which was quite large, spanning several thousand feet, and there were many shelves in the shop that were laden with spirit plants and materials. At this moment, there were many other cultivators already in the shop, and Han Li was immediately greeted by an azure-robed employee. "How can I help you, esteemed customer? We have the widest range and the cheapest prices that you'll find in Primordial Origin City." "I'll take a look on my own," Han Li replied as he waved a dismissive hand. The employee gave an affirmative response, but didn't walk away. Instead, he continued to trail along some distance behind Han Li. Han Li swept his gaze over the surrounding shelves as he gave an internal nod. Due to its location, Primordial Origin City was rather isolated from the rest of the northern glacial Immortal region, but the materials here were very much eye-opening for Han Li. They were all very rare items in other places, and in particular, most of the spirit beast materials here were unidentifiable to Han Li, so they most likely came from outside of the northern glacial Immortal region. Fortunately, all of the wares being sold in the shop had signs beside them that laid out their names and how they could be used. It didn't take long before Han Li had explored the entire shop, and he was looking a little disappointed. While it was true that the materials in the shop were quite rare, none of them were of a very high caliber, and most of them were only useful to cultivators below the true immortal stage. The azure-robed employee noticed Han Li's expression, and he rushed over to Han Li before pointing at a staircase in the shop as he said, "Are you looking for some better materials, esteemed customers? The first floor only holds the ordinary spirit materials, while all of the high-grade materials are on the second floor." "All right, I'll take a look," Han Li replied with a nod. "Please come with me." The employee led the way forward, and it didn't take long before they arrived on the second floor. In contrast with the first floor, there were only 7 or 8 shelves on the second floor, but they had clearly been constructed with better materials and design. Han Li's gaze roamed over the materials on the shelves, and his eyes quickly lit up. These materials were far more abundant in spiritual power than the ones downstairs. Almost all of them were meant for true immortal cultivators, and there were even a few that could be used by golden immortals. As Han Li walked along the shelves, his eyes suddenly lit up as he stopped in his tracks, and his gaze settled on a red vine. "This is a length of heavenly siphon vine. It's a very rare material, and we only recently secured it from a primordial hunter," the employee explained. "Let me take a closer look at it," Han Li said. The employee pulled out a badge to dispel the transparent restriction around the shelf, then carefully pulled out the red spirit vine before handing it to Han Li. Han Li accepted the spirit plant, and an elated look appeared in his eyes following a closer inspection. The heavenly siphon vine was one of the main materials for refining heavenly luster pills, one of the pills in the Huanan pill scripture, so it seemed that he was in luck. "I'll take this vine, how much is it?" he asked. Even though he had already gathered all of the ingredients required to refine infernal azure pills, it naturally couldn't hurt for him to refine as many of the pills on the Huanan pill scripture as possible. Heavenly siphon pills are useful even to cultivators above the true immortal stage, and this one is over 100,000 years old, so it'll cost 350 immortal origin stones, the employee replied after a brief hesitation. 350 immortal origin stones was quite a large sum, even for a late true immortal cultivator, but Han Li didn't even hesitate as he replied, "I'll take it." At the moment, he had over 2 million immortal origin stones in his possession, so 350 was but a trifling sum. The employee was ecstatic. Han Li continued to browse through the wares on the shelves, but was unable to find any more materials that were useful to him. Shortly thereafter, he left the shop with the heavenly siphon vine. However, instead of leaving this street, he made his way into another nearby shop. Before long, almost an entire day had passed by, and Han Li had explored all of the materials shops in the area, securing many useful materials in the process. Even though Primordial Origin City wasn't as large as some of the major cities in more prosperous parts of the northern glacial Immortal Palace, its location meant that there were many types of precious materials here, so it was no wonder that the northern glacial Immortal Palace wanted to seize control of the city. Unfortunately, he was only able to find a few ingredients required for refining heavenly luster pills, and there were still many missing. The reason why he had been able to source all of the materials required for refining infernal azure pills was because Xiao Jinhin had almost completed the entire list for him. Han Li wasn't overly concerned or dismayed by this. He would just have to keep searching for heavenly luster pill ingredients after he entered the primordial land. After that, Han Li departed from the street of shops selling materials, then made his way onto a street lined with variety stores. He made his way into the largest shop on that street, then quickly emerged with a gray jade slip in his hand. The jade slip contained a map of the primordial land, but according to the shopkeeper, the map had been created based on information purchased from primordial hunters. The primordial land was fraught with peril, and a variety store like this one certainly didn't have the ability to verify the information that they had been supplied by these primordial hunters, so the shopkeeper didn't dare to vouch for the accuracy of the map. In other words, it could only be used for reference purposes, and Han Li was both amused and exasperated to hear this. Having explored countless places and purchased countless maps, this was the first time that he had heard something so irresponsible. However, given the perils of the primordial land, all of the maps being sold in the variety stores in the city suffered from the same pitfall. Han Li inspected the jade slip for a moment, then injected his spiritual sense into it. The map inside the jade slip was split up into two sections, a small section that was white in color and a far larger section that was gray. All of the white areas were quite close to Primordial Origin City, and there was very detailed information presented in those sections, including what demon beasts resided in those areas and what types of materials could be found there. As for the gray areas, they represented the unknown. According to the shopkeeper, those white areas were ones that had been explored extensively by people sent out by the city lord, so they were essentially official maps that were very reliable. As for the gray areas, the annotations on them had been made using information supplied by some primordial hunters, and it was impossible to verify the validity of the information. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li summoned another white jade badge, this one given to him by Worm 3, containing the map of the safe route through the primordial land. The route began at Primordial Origin City and led all the way to the Black Mountain Immortal region, but there were only some sparse pieces of information presented on the areas that the route passed through, while the other areas had been left completely empty. Han Li compared the contents of the two maps to find that Worm 3's map and the official map supplied by Primordial Origin City were virtually identical. However, outside of the official map, the gray areas displayed some rather significant differences compared with Worm 3's map, and it was impossible to tell which one was more accurate. A contemplative look appeared on Han Li's face as he made his way into another shop. Before long, he had visited dozens of shops and purchased a large collection of maps. There had to be some accurate information on these maps, and it certainly couldn't hurt to have more of them for his upcoming journey into the primordial land. By the time Han Li emerged from the final variety shop, night had already arrived. All of the streets in this area were lined with a type of white crystal that gave off a gentle white glow in the night, illuminating the area and giving it an air of wonder and opulence. At this moment, Han Li's brows were slightly furrowed. He had just verified Jin Tong's location using their spiritual connection, and she was still in Primordial Origin City, but for some reason, her spiritual sense was trembling slightly, a situation that generally only arose whenever she was in a state of heightened excitement while in battle. Han Li immediately set off for Jin Tong's location, quickly arriving in front of a huge, dome-shaped palatial building. The entrance of the palace was over 100 feet wide, and it was packed with people. This was one of the arenas in Primordial Origin City, and there were restrictions set up nearby, making it impossible for someone to sense what was happening inside the building from the outside. Han Li was rather perplexed to see this, and he immediately made his way into the arena. From the outside, the Black Palace didn't appear all that large, but it was quite spacious on the inside with 7 or 8 giant rings that were enshrouded within transparent restrictions. Each ring was around 5,000 to 6,000 feet in size, and they were surrounded by raucous spectators. Hanley stood at the entrance and swept his gaze over the surrounding area to find that fierce battles were taking place on all of the rings. Some were one-on-one battles between 2 demon beasts, some battles had more than 2 combatants, and some battles were taking place between demon beasts and cultivators. Whenever any of the combatants sustained any injuries, the people gathered around the ring would immediately let loose thunderous cheers. The raw brutality of these battles seemed to have ignited the bloodlust deep within the hearts of the spectators, and all of them were cheering with excitement. At the center of the arena was a large stone plaque, upon which were inscribed the matchups for the ongoing and upcoming battles, as well as the odds on offer. Hanley's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. He wasn't unfamiliar with these types of arenas, as he had seen other similar places in the past, but he didn't enjoy this type of environment much. He continued to scour through his surroundings, and he quickly caught sight of a familiar figure in the crowd beside one of the rings. Just like all of the spectators around her, Jin Tong was currently yelling loudly at the ring, and her face was brightly flushed. Hanley's brows furrowed slightly as he heaved a long sigh before making her way toward Jin Tong. Jin Tong seemed to be oblivious to his approach, and she was yelling at the top of her lungs, looking as if she wanted to jump into the ring to fight herself. "Jump, use your tail. Og, what an idiot." Hanley cast his gaze toward the ring in front of Jin Tong to find that there was a pair of ferocious beasts locked in battle inside. One of them resembled a giant lizard that was over 100 feet in length with its entire body covered in dark purple scales. There were also several sharp hooked spikes on its tail, and its mouth was filled with fangs that resembled sharp swords, giving it a very menacing appearance. The opposing beast resembled a lion that was 70 to 80 feet tall. It had a single horn on its head and an extremely fearsome physique, coupled with claws that resembled anchors. A hint of intrigue appeared in Hanley's eyes at the sight of the 2 beasts. According to his knowledge, both of the beasts in the ring were primordial demon beasts that had been captured from the primordial land. They were extremely vicious, but their demonic power had been sealed, so there was no danger to any of the spectators. At this moment, the 2 beasts were locked in an intense battle, with blood splattered in all directions, while scales and tufts of fur were flying everywhere. It was clear that Jin Tong was supporting the lizard-like beast, but it was gradually being forced onto the back foot by its opponent. Right at this moment, the lizard let loose a low roar before darting back like lightning, then swept its spiked tail horizontally through the air, lashing out viciously at its pouncing opponent. However, the horned beast possessed agility that belied its bulky appearance, and it quickly darted away to the side, allowing it to evade the lizard's sweeping tail. Before the lizard had a chance to do anything, the horned beast bit down like lightning, sinking its fangs into the midsection of the lizard's tail before whipping its head ferociously to one side. The lizard was swung through the air, before crashing heavily into the restriction that encompassed the ring. Immediately thereafter, the horned beast pounced forward, and its horn pierced viciously into the lizard's belly, pinning it into the restriction. A vast volume of blood erupted out of the lizard's body as it let loose an agonized wail, and it was struggling with all its might, but unable to break free. As it continued to bleed, the lizard's struggles quickly became feebler and feebler, until it finally fell completely still. The horned beast took a step backward, then whipped its head to the side again to send the lizard flying through the air. A loud thump rang out as the lizard fell onto the ground, and its limbs spasmed a few times before quickly falling still. A wave of thunderous cheers instantly erupted around the ring, and the horned beast stood with its head held high and its blood-stained horn pointed directly upward, as if it were basking in the cheers. Jin Tong stomped her foot into the ground, in frustration upon seeing this. Standing beside her was a purple-robed young man, and he chuckled. "Looks like I win this time." "Don't get cocky just from winning one bet," Jin Tong scoffed with a displeased pout. Han Li was rather taken aback to see this. Jin Tong had always been quite resentful toward cultivators other than himself, so it was very surprising for him to see her interacting with another cultivator like this. With that in mind, he took a glance at the purple-robed young man, upon which his pupils immediately contracted slightly. The man was giving off a true immortal stage aura, but with Han Li's immense spiritual sense, he was immediately able to tell that this was a disguise, and that his true cultivation base was at the mid-golden immortal stage. Furthermore, the aura that he was giving off indicated that he was a demonic cultivator. "Jin Tong," Han Li called out. "Oh, what a coincidence, uncle!" Jin Tong exclaimed as she rushed over to Han Li. The purple-robed man also turned around to discover Han Li approaching him and Jin Tong. The man appeared to be in his 20s with a head of slightly curly white hair and a set of handsome features. His eyes were particularly bright, and his pupils were a peculiar light purple color. "I had to come looking for you because you've been gone an entire day and it's already nighttime," Han Li grumbled. Jin Tong scratched her head in a sheepish manner as she replied, "Is it already that late? I didn't notice. You should come and play with us, uncle. It's really fun here." Han Li paid no heed to Jin Tong as he asked, "Who is this fellow Taoist, Jin Tong?" "He's a friend I just made. His name is Shi Chuankong," Jin Tong replied. At this point, the purple-robed man had also made his way over to Han Li, and he cupped his fist in a salute as he said, "I am Shi Chuankong, a primordial hunter. May I ask your name?" As he raised his hands to cup his fist in a salute, his sleeves slid down his forearms to reveal a layer of fine purple scales over his skin. Han Li raised an eyebrow upon seeing this, and he returned the salute and replied, "My name is Li Feiyu." "It's a pleasure to meet you, fellow Taoist Li. Jin Tong and I have been getting along quite well, and we've been having some fun betting on the battles here. I hope I haven't caused any trouble for you," Shi Chuankong said. "Jin Tong has always been quite naughty, and I don't know how to keep her in check, so I'm very grateful that you've been looking after her for me," Han Li replied with a smile. "That's good to hear. By the way, I heard from Jin Tong that the two of you have only just arrived in Primordial Origin City and are planning to travel to the Primordial Land. I also plan to travel to the Primordial Land by ship in half a month, so how about we travel together?" Shi Chuankong proposed. "Thank you for the kind offer, fellow Taoist Shi, but we already have other plans," Han Li refused with a shake of his head. "Is that so? What a pity," Shi Chuankong replied with a disappointed expression. "We still have some other matters to attend to, so we'll be taking our leave now, fellow Taoist Shi," Han Li declared. "Surely there's no hurry to leave, fellow Taoist Li. Why don't you place a few bets as well?" Shi Chuankong proposed. Right at this moment, another wave of raucous cheers rang out from the nearby ring, and another battle had begun. An excited look immediately appeared on Jin Tong's face upon hearing this, but Han Li shook his head as he replied, "Once again, thank you for the kind offer, fellow Taoist, but I'm not interested in betting on these arena battles, so I'll leave you to it." He then grabbed onto the reluctant Jin Tong and dragged her toward the entrance of the hall. Shi Chuankong shook his head in disappointment before turning back to the ring again. "Ali, why were you with that man, Jin Tong?" Han Li asked after exiting the arena. "He was constantly betting against me, so we started challenging each other," Jin Tong replied as she placed her hands on her hips. "What do you think of him?" Hanley asked. He has a similar scent to yours, so I don't detest him like other cultivators. Jin Tong replied as she summoned a tanghulu and began nibbling on it. That's certainly a rare occurrence, Hanley mused with a contemplative expression. Is there a problem with him, uncle? Jin Tong asked. There's more to him than meets the eye, so make sure to be careful if you run into him again, Hanley cautioned. For sure, next time I see him, I'll definitely be more careful so that I don't lose to him again, Jin Tong replied with a firm nod. Jin Tong was left feeling rather speechless by this response, and he took a glance back at the arena, then returned to the faint smoke garden with Jin Tong. The next day, he shopped for some more things that could be useful for the upcoming journey into the primordial land, then returned to the faint smoke garden and remained in his room the majority of the time thereafter. As a safety precaution, he didn't allow Jin Tong to continue wandering the city as she pleased. During his infrequent outings, he wasn't able to gather much information about the primordial land, but he did hear some things about the Sea of Sand outside the city. The Sea of Sand wasn't just a barren desert. Instead, some earth attribute spirit materials could be found there, and there was also a type of special sand beast residing in the area, beasts that could be slain for their precious sand crystals, which were similar to demon cores. Many of the cultivators in Primordial Origin City often ventured into the outskirts of the Sea of Sand to slay some smaller sand beasts for their sand crystals. However, there had been some unrest in the Sea of Sand recently, resulting in the disappearances of many of the cultivators who had ventured into it, so people were much more apprehensive about the area. Half a month flew by in a flash, and the day that the ship was set to depart quickly arrived. Hanley left the faint smoke garden early in the morning, then traveled straight to the western city gate with Jin Tong sitting on his finger as a ring. The biannual ship departures were considered to be important events in Primordial Origin City, so aside from the cultivators traveling on the ship, many spectators had also gathered at the city gate. By the time Hanley arrived, he discovered that there were already hundreds of cultivators that were lined up at the entrance of the Black Hall on the inside of the city wall, holding their ship tickets for examination. Upon joining the line, Hanley briefly scoured through the surrounding crowd to find that only a small number of them were true immortals, while the vast majority of them were Grand Ascension cultivators. This wasn't all that surprising to him. After all, past experience had already shown that the chances of survival for cultivators below the Grand Ascension stage entering the primordial land were simply far too low, even when it came to the already charted areas. However, even for Grand Ascension cultivators traveling through the same charted areas, their chances of survival also weren't very high. Despite this, they were still willing to take the risk for the chance of being able to secure opportunities that could allow them to ascend to immortality. Even though the line was very long, there was barely anyone speaking, and even some of the cultivators who were here in groups were conversing with one another in hushed tones or through voice transmission, so the atmosphere was rather solemn. A few minutes later, the sun finally rose over the city wall, and the first ray of sunlight shone down upon the foot of the city wall, while the toll of a bell rang out from above. As the bell toll rang out, a black-robed elderly man emerged from the entrance of the Black Hall, then announced that the ship was ready for boarding before beginning to examine the tickets and allowing the passengers into the hall. The cultivators up ahead entered the hall one after another, and before long, it was Hanley's turn. As he offered up his black spirit talisman, the black-robed elderly man flipped a hand over to produce a white jade badge, which he pressed against the talisman, and the latter instantly turned into a wisp of black smoke that seeped into the white jade badge. Immediately thereafter, the words "A Grade Cabin 13" appeared on the badge. Hanley accepted the badge from the black-robed elderly man, upon which he discovered that there were many tiny characters engraved onto its back. As he made his way into the hall, he flipped the badge over to see what was inscribed on the back, and at the top of the badge was inscribed the word rules, and the rules of the ship were laid out down below. The first rule was that fighting was strictly prohibited on the ship, regardless of what purpose it was for, and breaking this rule was punishable by death. The second rule was that no one was allowed to leave the ship for any reason, and this transgression was also punishable by death. Overall, there were 17 rules in total, and death was the consequence for breaking most of them. Upon entering the hall, Han Li caught sight of a stone staircase at the back of the hall that led up toward the top of the city wall, and there were currently many people making their way up the staircase. Han Li did the same, and it didn't take long before arrived at the top of the majestic city wall. The city wall appeared even wider than it from down below, so wide that 100 people could easily walk along it side by side. The giant slabs of black stone that were used to pave the city wall were riddled with marks that had been left behind by the passage of time, and at the moment, there were dozens of giant yellow lautuans hovering above the city wall. These lautuans had bulging centers and tapered tips, and there weren't any fancy decorations on them. However, they had been completely encased in some type of special metallic material that was riddled with strange runes, giving them a rough and antiquated appearance. Furthermore, almost all of the ships were riddled with gashes that varied in depth and severity, with some that barely scratched the surface, as well as some that tore through the layer of metal casing and even cut deep into the exposed dragon bone down below. Groups of black-robed cultivators holding disc treasures in their hands were gathered around the ships, using some type of special secret technique to repair them. From Han Li's observation, he could see that the most common types of damage displayed on the ships were long and thin gashes and giant conical holes, seemingly having been inflicted by one or two types of primordial beasts. Right at this moment, a purple figure caught up to him from behind, then began to walk alongside him as they introduced. That's the handiwork of sandthorn snakes and man-faced scorpions. One possesses tails as sharp as blades, while the other possesses spike-like pincers. They're the two most common types of demon beasts in the Sea of Sand, and their offensive prowess is rather ordinary, but they're very abundant in numbers. Han Li's brows furrowed ever so slightly as he greeted, "Welcome, fellow Taoist Shi." The purple-robed figure was none other than Shi Chuankong, who Han Li had previously encountered in the arena. "It's good to see you here, fellow Taoist Li. I've already been waiting for over 3 months in Primordial Origin City to take this ship. If I had to wait any longer, I would have died of boredom," Shi Chuankong chuckled. "I don't think you would have been bored with all of the arenas in the city," Han Li said with a smile. "I was only doing a little bit of gambling to pass the time," Shi Chuankong replied with a slightly embarrassed expression. "By the way, where's the little girl who was with you last time?" Before Han Li had a chance to reply, a gust of black wind suddenly blew onto the scene from a beacon tower to the north, and a middle-aged man wearing an embroidered black robe emerged. The black-robed man had a golden badge hanging from his waist, upon which were inscribed the words Primordial Origin City, clearly indicating that he was from the City Lord's Manor. He's the ship overseer sent by the City Lord's Manor, and he's responsible for maintaining order on the ship and dealing with unforeseen mishaps. In the past, this duty was occasionally assigned to several late true immortal cultivators, but ever since the incident from 8 years ago, it's been solely golden immortals who have been assigned with this task, Shi Chuankong explained. "It's time to board the ship," Shi Chuankong continued as he took a subtle glance at the golden ring on Han Li's finger. As soon as his voice trailed off, the early golden immortal stage ship overseer descended onto a nearby ship, and shortly thereafter, what appeared to be an administrator emerged from the ship, before commencing the boarding process. It didn't take long for all of the passengers to board the ship, following which the administrator laid out the rules of the ship, which were identical to the ones inscribed onto the white jade badge. After that, the administrator declared for the ship to depart, and most of the passengers quickly dispersed, returning to their own cabins. They say the same things every single time. I'm starting to develop calluses in my ears from hearing this spiel so many times. This is your first time traveling on a ship like this, right, Brother Lee? The scenery in the Sea of Sand is quite spectacular, but I've already grown sick of it after seeing it so many times, so I'll leave you to appreciate the scenery on your own, Shi Chuankong said as he cupped his fist in a parting salute. Go ahead, fellow Taoist, Han Li replied as he returned the salute. Shi Chuankong smiled as he said, surely there's no need to be so cold and distant. How about you refer to me as Brother Shi from now on? Han Li merely smiled and offered no response to this. Shi Chuankong shrugged in a nonchalant fashion, then casually strolled back to his cabin. Han Li watched him depart for a moment, then turned his gaze elsewhere, but he was still pondering the motives of this excessively friendly demonic man. It didn't seem like he harbored any sinister intentions, but Han Li decided that it would be best to keep his distance. As these thoughts were flashing through his mind, the ship gradually began to ascend, rising up from the dock on the city wall. After flying away from the city wall, the ship commenced a gradual descent, flying down the sheer cliff face toward the boundless sea of sand down below. Right as the ship was about to descend into the vast sea of sand, all of the runes inscribed onto the ship lit up in unison. Immediately thereafter, a burst of faint yellow light suddenly erupted out of the ship, forming a giant yellow light barrier that encompassed the entire ship. At the same time, a peculiar primordial aura also began to emanate from the ship. An enlightened look appeared on Han Li's face upon sensing this. No wonder the ship can avoid the detection of the majority of primordial beasts. It's using a protective formation with the core of a powerful primordial beast as a foundation to disguise itself as a primordial being. Right at this moment, the underside of the ship seemed to have finally come into contact with the bottom of the sea of sand, and after bobbing up and down slightly for a moment, it continued onward in a smooth and stable fashion. Han Li made his way over to the railing of the ship, then looked down to find that the layer of metal that the ship was encased in seemed to possess a special type of magnetism that repelled the sea of sand, allowing the ship to hover just above the sea of sand as it glided along. All of a sudden, the light radiating from the ship brightened considerably, and it accelerated drastically, shooting forward like a speeding arrow. Han Li cast his gaze into the distance, and all he saw was a vast and peaceful expanse of yellow sand. There was no sound to be heard, and it seemed that the entire sea of sand was completely desolate and lifeless. One of the rules on the Jade Badge was that cultivators weren't permitted to release their spiritual sense to examine the sea of sand in case they alerted some particularly sensitive primordial beasts, and the administrator had also emphasized the importance of abiding by this rule. Han Li didn't want to cause any unnecessary trouble, so he was happy to follow the rule. It was going to take at least half a year to reach the primordial land, and after watching the sea of sand for around 2 hours, Han Li also grew bored of the monotonous scenery, so he returned to his cabin as well. Han Li's cabin was quite spacious, roughly twice the size of a normal room, and it was split up into 2 sections. The inner room was the bedroom that housed a bed, while the outer room held a redwood table and a gray cushion. The spirit fruits placed on the table weren't exactly of the highest caliber, but they were giving off a very sweet and fragrant aroma. Upon entering the room, the ring on Han Li's finger immediately transformed into a golden beetle, then flew down onto the cushion, where it transformed into an adorable little girl wearing a red coat. Jin Tong's eyes immediately locked onto the spirit fruits on the table, and her hand shot out like lightning to grab onto an ovular spirit fruit that was riddled with golden seeds. She sank her teeth into the fruit, and the entire room was instantly filled with a fruity aroma. "Why didn't you let me show myself to that guy before, uncle? The two of us get along quite well," Jin Tong asked while munching on her fruit. "That man's aura indicates that he's a demonic cultivator, but it's also somewhat different. I'm unable to see through him without using my eye of truth. On top of that, he clearly knew that you were the ring on my finger, yet he still asked where you were, and I can't get a good grasp on his intentions," Hanley said in a thoughtful manner. "Are you saying that he's plotting against us, uncle?" Jin Tong asked. "I can't say for sure for now, but given that we're in a completely unfamiliar place, it would be best to avoid trouble as much as possible," Hanley said. "It would be great if he's considering coming after us. I'd have another golden immortal stage nascent soul to eat then," Jin Tong mused with a sly grin. Hanley was left feeling rather speechless upon hearing this. He was just about to warn Jin Tong not to start any trouble when his expression abruptly stiffened slightly. "What's wrong, uncle?" Jin Tong hurriedly asked. "Just now, an extremely powerful aura locked onto the ship, but it vanished in a flash. Did you not sense it?" Hanley asked with slightly furrowed brows. Before Jin Tong had a chance to reply, Hanley held up a hand to stop her as he said, "There it is again." Jin Tong hurriedly focused on her senses upon hearing this, but she was only able to detect a slight trace of what Hanley had detected. "Did you feel that, Ziobai?" she asked in a hesitant manner. The jade pixie offered no response as it hung motionlessly from Hanley's waist. "How dare you ignore me? I think you're asking for a beating," Jin Tong threatened as she placed her hands on her hips in an angry display. "I'm not ignoring you, I just didn't want to show you up. I already sensed that aura the first time that it appeared," the jade pixie explained. "So you're saying you're better than me?" Jin Tong asked as she raised an eyebrow. "No, not at all. I came from the primordial land, so I'm naturally more sensitive to the auras of primordial beings," the jade pixie hurriedly explained. "Can you determine the origins of this aura?" Hanley asked. "I was born in the primordial land, but I was captured by primordial hunters not long after I was born, and I only learned from Gongshu Jiu that I was a primordial true spirit. Hence, I don't actually know much about the primordial land. All I can do is detect this aura, but not discern it," the jade pixie replied. Right as Hanley was about to speak, that faint aura encompassed the entire ship once again. "You stay here," he said to Jin Tong, then flew out of the room to emerge onto the deck outside. As he did so, he discovered that there were only around 20 people on the deck gathered together in small groups, chatting with one another in a relaxed manner, and it was clear that none of them had detected this aura. On the other side of the deck, he spotted the familiar figure of Shi Chuankong, who was currently looking around with a peculiar expression. He faltered slightly upon spotting Hanley, then gave him a knowing smile, in response to which Hanley gave a slight nod before returning to his cabin. After sweeping over the ship 3 more times, the powerful aura finally disappeared once and for all. However, Hanley remained on his guard, not daring to grow complacent at all. In fact, his wariness was only continuing to grow by the day. Over 5 months passed by in the blink of an eye. The journey proved to be rather uneventful, and the ship was about to reach the primordial land. Early in the morning, a cool morning breeze was blowing from the primordial land. Hanley stood on the ship with his hands clasped behind his back, peering into the distance with blue light flashing in his eyes. At the end of his field of vision was a speck of green, indicating that there seemed to be an oasis on the distant horizon. There were already close to 100 people gathered on the deck, all of whom were passengers who were eager to disembark. Jin Tong was standing beside Han Li, copying him by clasping her hands behind her back as well, and she asked, "Are you still worried about that aura, uncle?" "No, I'm thinking about how we should proceed once we reach the primordial land. There are quite a few disparities between the maps we purchased and the one given to me by Worm 3. I feel like the route that she gave me isn't actually the safest one, seeing as I haven't truly agreed to join the reincarnation palace. At the very least, the supplied route seems to be incomplete," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "Aren't you tired thinking about so much all the time? If there's no good path to take, then let's just establish one of our own," Jin Tong proposed with a nonchalant smile. Right at this moment, an alarmed voice rang out from within the crowd. "What's that?" "Something's coming from over there." Han Li turned to discover a long black line that was rapidly surging over the distant horizon like a black wave, and he could clearly see that this black line was comprised of countless giant creatures with human faces and black scorpion bodies. Each of the creatures had a thick and burly tail, at the end of which was a crescent-shaped hook that was giving off a cold and menacing gleam. "Those are man-faced scorpions," someone exclaimed. Man-faced scorpions weren't particularly powerful among the demon beasts residing in the Sea of Sand, but there was an extremely vast number of them, and in the face of a beast tide of man-faced spiders, even true immortals would struggle to keep them at bay. Right at this moment, a deep and resonant voice rang out from the top floor of the Laochuan. "There's no need to panic." The ship overseer was standing there behind the railing, looking on with an unflustered expression. An HSI calm demeanor instilled within everyone on the ship a sense of confidence and reassurance. "Those man-faced spiders aren't anywhere near enough to pose a real threat. Make sure to keep yourselves grounded so that you don't get jostled out of the ship. If you fall off the ship, no one will come to save you," the ship overseer declared in a cold voice. All of the passengers with lackluster cultivation bases hurriedly distanced themselves from the railing of the ship upon hearing this for fear of falling overboard, and some of them returned to their cabins altogether. Han Li paid no heed to the warning, as his gaze remained firmly fixed on the black wave in the distance. "There's something else there in addition to man-faced scorpions," Han Li said as his brows furrowed slightly. Jin Tong had also climbed onto the railing of the ship to look into the distance through narrowed eyes. The sand beneath the wave of man-faced scorpions was constantly undulating, indicating that there was something traveling through the sand at a rapid speed. "It's coming," Han Li said as he hoisted Jin Tong down from the railing. The wave of man-faced scorpions quickly arrived to block the ship's path. Each man-faced scorpion was the size of a fully grown ox, and they were climbing on top of one another in layers, forming a small black mountain in front of the ship in the blink of an eye. The ship overseer's brows furrowed slightly, and he seemed to have also realized that something wasn't quite right. Such a large-scale scorpion tide wasn't very common, but it wasn't an unprecedented occurrence either. However, never had the man-faced scorpions ever attacked in such an organized fashion. Before he had a chance to get a grasp on what was happening, the ship had already crashed heavily into the Black Mountain with a dull thud. The ship shuddered violently as it was slowed down significantly, and the yellow light barrier around it instantly began to glow brightly. Immediately thereafter, all of the patterns engraved onto the ship also lit up, and the ship abruptly began to accelerate, forcing its way straight through the Black Mountain. A string of grotesque cracks rang out incessantly, and it was the sound of countless man-faced scorpion exoskeletons being shattered one after another. Everyone on the ship stabilized themselves while cheering at what they were seeing. Han Li was holding onto Jin Tong with one hand, while leaning over the ship's railing to peer into the sea of sand down below. The yellow sand down below was churning incessantly, and there were countless yellow demon beasts that resembled maggots the size of dogs squirming and writhing within the sand. Han Li was quickly able to identify these things, and he immediately yelled, "There are sand beasts that are eating away at the ship from below." Everyone was very alarmed to hear this, and they hurriedly rushed over to the railing of the ship to look down below. At this point, there were already countless squirming sand beasts clinging to the ship, and its metal casing was already riddled with countless holes. To make matters even worse, there were several sand beasts that were significantly larger than their brethren eating their way through the dragon bones at the front of the ship in a frenzy. These sand beasts had virtually no facial features, and if it weren't for their circular mouths that were lined with sharp fangs, it would be impossible to tell which end was their head and which was their tail.